60 is underway from 6th and Peabody. Friday edition is here. Just like that, the weekend is upon us. We're going to get you ready for the college football weekend, plus the Week 11 slate across the NFL. Danny Kanell will be with us. That's coming up in an hour. We'll talk college football headlines with him. Plus, Chad's got his top 10 college football games of the week. That is in about 20 minutes from now. We've got some upset picks for you and much more. The Titans win over the Green Bay Packers last night for Thursday Night Football. All the momentum with Green Bay after that 1 week, Chad, after Sunday. And 4 days later, the world is ending again. 27-17 the final. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. That was really the opportunity. And by the way, we're gonna speed into this weekend here. Okay, we're not gonna go faltering our way into a weekend of football. We're gonna go fast into the weekend. We're gonna be ready to go today. It's gonna be a fun show. Looking forward to talking with Danny Kanell, world-renowned SEC denier. Danny Kanell is how I would describe him. That's gonna be fun coming up. Yeah,
there's always that one friend.
Yeah, absolutely. You told them, the sky is blue. They're going to tell you why it's not. That's Danny Kanell. And we
tell Shaq there's only one moon. He's going to say absolutely not.
He's going to tell you about that time in Auburn when he was driving and the moon appeared on the other side of his car. And that means there's two moons. Look, last night, we previewed it yesterday. That was the opportunity for the the Packers to reclaim their season. And instead what happened, the Titans went in there, and Ryan Tannehill throws for 333 yards, and they showed a side of their offense they have not shown all year against a good Packers defense. That was an impressive performance by Tannehill, the Titans receivers, tight ends, and a really impressive performance by Mike Vrabel. Once again, I tweeted this out after the game. Dude is an elite football coach at any level, but he is an elite NFL head coach right now. I'm ready to pronounce that, and he showed why last night. That's a great road win for the Titans and really suffocated any life the Packers were showing in that Sunday comeback win against the Cowboys.
Well, and it was 20-17. They drove 63 yards, the Titans, to go get a touchdown and made it a two-score game. That game was different in how they went about winning. 27 points, season high for them. The defense then followed that touchdown with 4 stops. Aaron Rodgers was errant with some passes, but the offense was never in rhythm. They were backed up in some situations. The real turning point of the game, though, was when Henry was stopped on that 4th down around the goal line. And Green Bay got the ball back after that long drive in the third quarter where the Titans dominated time of possession. And Green Bay got the ball back and had the 3-and-out where Rodgers barely got out of the end zone. The entire body's got to be inside the end zone for it to be a safety. And throws the pass away. They end up punting from their own end zone. Titans get it right back. Great field position. Already deep into Green Bay territory, they drive down and get the touchdown anyway. That was the flip in the game where if Green Bay was going to have a sign of life, like they did against the Cowboys, it was at that moment. And while Christian Watson seems to be a budding star for them, there is no consistency if you stop the Green Bay rushing attack. Green Bay had that in the first half against Dallas, Chad. The Titans defense, no one's running on them. And they did a great job last night defensively with their overall plan. And while I didn't think Aaron Rodgers by any means was uncomfortable in the pocket, under duress, I think the Titans only sacked him one time. At no point did I think, there's some momentum here with their offense, and they're about to go drive and score. Titans shut them down.
Yeah, I agree. And 3 possessions total in the first half for the Packers. I think that was ultimately the story of the game, was not just the game plan, but the execution of it from the Titans to limit possessions with Aaron Rodgers in the offense, lengthen drives, get a bunch of big throughout the night 3rd down pass pickups. Very impressive performance all around from the Titans. It wasn't even a joke. I said throughout the year, this is not a team that will ever score more than 24 points in a game. And they scored 27 in Lambeau on a night where it was snow flurries throughout a good chunk of the game. So very impressive win for the Titans. Back to square one, though, for the Packers, who now, Hutton, are really up against it in terms of playoff chances, in terms of what they have to do, and almost how perfect they have to be down the stretch to get back in the race.
And also, the difference for the Titans here, and this factors into the league, the AFC playoff seeding, all of it now moving forward. Treylon Burks, who the Titans, when they traded away A.J. Brown, moved up to the 16th pick and selected Treylon Burks out of Arkansas. This was the coming out party for him within the rookie season, which is he's been banged up. There was a slow start in the offseason. This was the time for him to be on display, and this is a great time for him to actually turn a corner. They're trying to get him and Chikakonkwo, another rookie tight end, more involved. And if they can get Okonkwo involved, Chad, that means Austin Hooper. Things open up for him. We saw that last night. And with Treylon Burks, over 100 yards receiving, and the best game by far of his rookie season, if they are able to have some semblance of a downfield passing attack, because they got that last night, 31 yards to Okonkwo. They had a 43-yard pass to Treylon Burks. They had a 42-yard screen on a great play call to Derrick Henry. Robert Woods, as a number 2 receiver last night, was very good. There are signs of optimism for an offense that has been stuck in the mud. How consistent can they be in that? Because Henry was, for the most part, shut down. He was very, very productive in the pass game, which is more or less a branch of their run game with those screens. They want to get him in the open field against smaller defensive backs and safeties. But can they do that more consistently with their wideouts? Can Treylon Burks be a consistent factor instead of just a blip on the radar? We'll find out moving forward. Now, 10 days, Cincinnati's the next team that will come in. Jamar Chase, by the way, for the Bengals, has been ruled out this week. He's expected back in Week 12 as the Titans will host the Bengals, with Cincinnati going to Pittsburgh this week, and then a chance to try to stack some wins within the AFC as they're battling for the playoffs. They get back, the Titans do last night, and their offensive coordinator, Todd Downing, is cited and charged with driving under the influence. Booked around, 4:30 in the morning, something like that?
4:46 a.m., I think, was his official time of his booking, and he was out on bail by 6:55 a.m., a couple hours later.
Yeah, it just, that's going to be a storyline now moving forward as to how the league will handle it, because there is a league policy with this that the Titans will have to follow. I'm sure there's internal discipline too. But this was, for Todd Downing, this was his best game play calling, I think, since he took over for Arthur Smith. I don't think there's a stretch there, considering that the run game really wasn't all that effective. It was impactful because they were able to sustain drives. They ate clock. So it's not like it was 3 and out and 2 yards per carry. But Henry didn't. He averaged, I think, just over 3 in this game. But you still had to respect the run. Downing, who has been on the perpetual hot seat with the fan base locally based on the production or lack thereof and the inability to win games in the postseason dating back to last year and how things finished there, coming off the best game of his offensive coordinator tenure here in Nashville last year and this year, this is awful, because now you've got a spot where Tim Kelly, who was the offensive coordinator for the Houston Texans, is already here. And, coming off a great game, Chad, I'm automatically thinking, well, if Tim Kelly, if Downing's suspended or whatever it ends up being, and Tim Kelly really picks up and takes off with this, there's your guy. And maybe that's a stretch too, because, again, he was very good. Downing was very good last night calling this game. He had a great game plan. But this is a 1 step forward, 2 steps back issue with Downing. And, if it was more the same of what we've seen, I wonder what happens. Instead of great game and great game plan by the overall offense and production.
You talked about the criticism from Titans fans towards Todd Downing. I found out about this story this morning. Got a text from a buddy who's a diehard Titans fan that says, man, this isn't the way that I was hoping to get rid of Todd Downing, but it'll do, when he saw the news about the DUI. And I'm thinking, well, not after that performance.
Right.
I mean, that was great last night, what we saw out of Todd Downing. If you're a Titans fan, you got to be pleased that the touchdown pass from Derrick Henry, what a great call that was, the pass to Austin Hooper for the touchdown.
It was a great game for him.
Great game plan, great pass schemes throughout the game to get guys open. The deep shot to Treylon Burks.
But the way
when they
set
get the
up,
ball back,
I
mean, there were so many things I liked
subtlety,
about his plan.
The plan of the 4th and 1 where they get to the line, the official comes up, the white hat comes up to Tannehill, and Tannehill's like, because I think he's asking him, we're about to reset the play clock. and you can see Tannehill do the play clock, like, let's pump it. And then as soon as the play clock resets, they rush to the line on 4th down. Then he acts like he can't hear the call or he's confused about the check at the line. They direct snap to Henry. He dives forward. He gets the great execution there on just a subtlety. And then the disguise, I did not think, and I've seen the Henry pass many times. He threw for a touchdown last year in a 27-3 win over Kansas City. This one was different in how they set this up. And Tannehill, even with the ball fake on, acting like he's throwing over the top, like the Tim Tebow jump pass. And it ended up being Henry. So Henry ends up with 130 all-purpose yards. He throws for a touchdown to Austin Hooper. Again, all of the design was very well executed and well-timed based on Downing. And then, lands in Nashville and gets the DUI. Now you're trying to figure out, okay, long weekend now. Next week's the holiday week. I think they'll, typically if you have the Thursday game before Thanksgiving, you'll practice Tuesday and Wednesday. You're off Thursday and you practice again on Friday. And you're now in the backstretch of the season with a ton of momentum, but the uncertainty of what's going to happen with the play caller now.
Yeah, it's look, there's never a good time to get arrested, obviously,
right.
But coming off last night with that performance, it felt like a breakthrough for the Titans. Not that a team that's 7-3 and in control of their division is in need of a breakthrough, but going back this morning and rewatching every play of that game, especially on offense, what I saw, Hutton, was, boy, this is a Titans team that may break their identity a bit, and that's a good thing. They can actually break the mold at times of having to run it. They're going to have to play great defense. That's part of their formula. But they showed some different things they can do, and Treylon Burks gave you a glimmer of hope that in the last part of this season, he can be something pretty good for the Titans. So there was a lot of hope coming out of that, and then to wake up and get this news, it's unfortunate.
Well, and just moving forward, big picture now, if you're trying to jump on the Titans bandwagon from afar, the question is, do you believe in the postseason Tannehill can have a performance like this that he did last night? Because the Titans won 12 games, they're the number one seed in the AFC last year. Vrabel's the coach of the year last year. Another great performance by him this season. Defense was very good last year. And a run game that you had to respect even without Derrick Henry. The question then, how we'll judge this team and how you have to figure out if you're on board or not is if you think Ryan Tannehill's going to go 22 of 27 and have the highest completion percentage of his Titan career, which he did last night. And I know he had the one turnover. It was a great disguise by the Packers secondary. But, he started both halves against Cincinnati in the postseason last year with a pick on his first attempt in each half. If you think it's going to be more of what we've seen this year from him, in the last 2 weeks especially, been very good despite him not being very mobile, then, yeah, they can turn a corner. But until then, until they prove it in the magnitude of the moment against a very good team, and the Packers are not good, it's hard for me to just go all in, chips on the table, and say, yeah, this is the year. It still is.
Oh, absolutely. I'm not coming close to that. Again, I'm calling this a glimmer. There was a glimmer of hope last night that I saw that this offense can possibly do more than I thought they could. And they did that last night. So if a breakthrough from Treylon Burks, a slight breakthrough from Robert Woods at times, they're getting the tight ends involved more in the game. Again, I'm not ready to declare anything other than what I've already declared. This is a defense-first, run-the-football team. But you have to find other ways to win in the playoffs. Mm-hmm. I didn't think they were capable of that. I thought all year, collision course to win the division, lose in the first playoff game. I still ultimately believe that's the case, but last night may change that if we can see more of that with that offense where they can do some different things. And very encouraging sign for the Titans.
Get Bill Vinovich as your white hat. He throws his crew for consecutive seasons now. He throws the least amount of penalties among any crew in the NFL. That was the case last night.
And I think coaches like that.
Titans got into a rhythm, and the Packers could have too. The difference is they're just more in sync and in tune with their identity. Tennessee is. And Green Bay was trying to figure out theirs, thought they had found it against Dallas in a comeback win, and now 4 days later, the tweets from the national perception is, hey, is it time to go to Jordan Love?
Yeah.
Which is crazy to think about from
time to turn the page. Or like I said, let's look at a trade for Aaron Rodgers and Trey Lance. Let's get Trey Lance as the next Packers quarterback.
I don't hate that idea.
Send him home. Send him back to his home.
Back to the elements.
It's a homecoming for Aaron Rodgers.
At least we did get a little snow.
Well, yeah,
last night.
it is a home. You're right. It's a return to the elements for Trey Lance too. But I believe North Dakota State actually plays indoors, so he's not accustomed to many elements at home at North Dakota State when he played there.
At least we did get a little snow last night, though.
Yeah.
We're not gonna see it. We'll see it in Buffalo, but we're not gonna see the game in Buffalo. Buffalo, the Bills they were not able to practice. They're trying to get to Detroit because of the weather. Cleveland's bussing. Again, it's that close.
Have you seen the photo today of Highmark Stadium?
No.
In Orchard Park? We need to find that. The Bills posted it, tweeted it out. But if we can show that photo, it's here it is.
Here it is. Look at this.
Good job.
Wow.
Good job by our team to have that ready to go. I mean, a running back would have to tunnel through that if they just left it. You wouldn't be able to see anything. Obviously, couldn't play that way. You'd have to get a lot of snow plows out there to make the field playable. But Sunday looks good, forecast-wise. The snow is going to be on the ground, but you can clear it, and it's not going to be bad on Sunday. But it's a emergency personnel resource issue for Western New York. My brother-in-law, who's from Western New York, is saying, this is a good thing. They have to have the resources. My response was, the people of Western New York can manage on their own. I want to see snow football. That's what I want. The police, they need to go the same. This should not get in the way of me watching this snow football game in Buffalo.
The Packers, going back to your point about what they do from here, they're now 4-7. They've lost 6 of their last 7, and you've got the home game. Titans on a short week, banged up, and that's how you perform. That's troubling, and you can see the frustration on LaFleur's face too on the sideline. There is just no.
There were 2 straight.
There's no confidence in what they're doing.
There were 2 straight 3-and-outs late when they were down 10 in the fourth quarter, needing something, and the frustration on Aaron Rodgers' face each time. A 4th and 10, they throw deep one time, and it's a miscommunication. The receiver stops, and it's just it was very defeated looking with him. Not even as much frustration as just not giving up, just defeated. Yeah. There was a reservation on his face that he's reserved and knowing we're just not very good on offense.
Coming up, Withrow is great at picking out the top 10 games of the college football weekend. If you start looking around the SEC slate and you see some of these matchups and, man, this could be a difficult week. Well, he's done it. He's done it yet again. The games you need to pay attention to for the Saturday slate across college football, that's next on OutKick 360.
Chris was a funny guy. And not like a clown, like make you laugh funny. He's just a genuinely funny guy. But I got to the team, and they were already deployed. Team 3 was deployed to Fallujah, and I got there and had a lot of time on my hands. So I went to free fall school and sniper school, and next thing you know, the team comes back, and I find out I'm in Chris's platoon. He had made a name for himself in Ramadi as a shooter, and at that point, he was just a white kid from Texas, so they called him Tex. But as a new guy sniper, Chris was really developing his reputation as the man. And if you've ever worked on a team with somebody who knows everything, like Chris was that guy. When it came to sniping, if it came time to do like diving, Chris wasn't there. He didn't like to dive and go underwater and do that whole C component of SEAL. But when it came to sniping, that was his thing. And his ability to teach people, like, he would hold you to a very, very high standard, but at the end of the day, like, he was there to teach you. And for a SEAL sniper, knowing that we were going to Ramadi at the 11th hour, that was huge, because he could have been that guy that was like, I really don't care. You're a new guy, just pick up brass and shut up. Or it's like, hey, when you're inside a sniper hide, this is how you got to set up so you don't get shot in the face. Thank you. I appreciate that. And his ability to teach young SEALs made us much, much more effective, because when we got to Ramadi, a lot of snipers were new guy SEALs. Myself, Johnny Kim, the astronaut now, we were stepping up into those roles, and we had to be combat effective. And it wasn't for Chris, the dude who knew everything, and his ability to teach with some humor, we wouldn't have been as effective as we were. For example, like Chris' story is his humor. And I discuss this in my book. We were out in the desert training. We're doing our land warfare block, and there's a little bit of like team building exercises that go on late in the evening. where if you're a new SEAL hanging out with a bunch of older operators and you don't see any of your new guy buddies around, you're probably in danger. So that exact moment happened. I was out in the desert, and the guys were having a couple cocktails. Look around, none of my fellow new guys were there. And then next thing you know, it's like a tsunami. You get jumped, taped up, and I wake up like a mummy, completely taped up. Like literally all my nose and my mouth were open. I was completely taped up and, strapped on a gurney and taken over in my rack and all that stuff, and left for, I thought, until I blossomed as a butterfly. And about 10 minutes later, I hear this cackling, and you could never not hear Chris's cackling coming a mile down the road. And he came down cackling. I could hear him cackling. He comes in. He's like, "Hey, buddy, you all right?" I'm like, "Yeah." And he's like, "Good. You're going to sit here for a little bit, then we'll cut you out." But that's, I think, the level that Chris would go to, whereas like some guys wouldn't care if you got taped up and left for dead. But Chris was one that definitely, he was kind of a hugger when it came to new guys. But that's what made him a great teacher, and that's what made us quite effective within his platoon.
So we obviously, what you just said about him is the guy, the teacher, the mentor. He sounds obviously as a class act individual. From the shooting standpoint, from the sniping standpoint, what made Chris Kyle when it came to getting that job done?
Yeah, he was a guy that was there for game time. He obviously put in the work. He was a great shot. There were times though that, he was not a great shot. I remember training on the range, and his target looked like he was shooting buckshot out there. He claimed like the scope rings were loose, but ultimately, like he was the hardest worker. He was the guy who sat behind the scope just tirelessly. His eye never came off the scope. You never saw his head droop, to rest his neck. And that's like, if you're a hunter, more time in the woods can make you a successful hunter. And Chris, his eye was always on the scope, and his dedication to the job. When it came to recce's and finding buildings, he knew where to set up. He knew where the enemy was coming from, and he was very, very good at getting us in the right position to interdict, which ultimately saves lives when it comes to Marines and Army. But he just had an uncanny intuition as to how to hunt properly on the battlefield.
Minutes. I've got 3 outright underdogs that I believe win on Sunday across the NFL. Plus, Danny Kanell joins us in 35 minutes across the OutKick network. From 6th and Peabody with Yeehaw Beer and Old Smoky Moonshine, OutKick 360 rolls on, and it is time for Chad Withrow's top 10 games of the college football weekend.
Need more reasons to watch college football? It's time to bang some hats. Here's Chad Withrow's must-see games this weekend.
Colin wanted me to step all over that intro, but I chose against it. I decided to let it roll. It's a beautiful intro. Beautiful weekend of games. Also, Hutton, I was a little bit surprised. Earlier in the week, I said, I'm going to have a hard time getting to 10 on this. I was surprised that I had a hard time cutting from 13 to 10 when we got these games. So not quite as bad of a weekend as I thought, but as you'll see with numbers 10 through around 8, maybe not the quality we've seen in the past, the bottom of the list. That's why we're going to start in the Mountain West. Game number 10 of the weekend, Boise State at Wyoming. Why is this a top game, you ask? Here's the reason. In the Mountain West Conference, they have a Mountain Division and they have a West Division. This game is for the Mountain Division. Boise State is 6-0, Wyoming 5-1. Boise State a 14-point road favorite in this game. But Hutton, you know what I always say. You don't just roll into Laramie and come out with a win
You do not.
easily. Wyoming has some of the most beautiful uniforms in all of sports. I'm a huge fan of the Cowboys uniform. I'm a huge fan of watching games in Laramie. It's going to be in the teens to low 20s for this game. It's on CBS Sports Network, 7 p.m. Eastern tomorrow night. This could be a fun one. High-scoring game.
You liking brown and yellow uniforms surprises me.
Yeah, it is a bit of a surprise, but it's the way they
it's how they put it together.
You know, also why I think I really like it, just going back into the annals of my mind, the old college football game on EA Sports.
Yes.
When I was in college,
Which is coming back.
we would pick a team and go dynasty mode and play against people in the apartment complex or the dorm.
Yes.
And everyone had a team. And the second team I chose was Wyoming. And I messed with the uniform combination the whole time, and I think that's why I liked it. My first team I went with was UNLV. Ended up winning national titles, UNLV. And I had a tight end that I recruited by the name of Byron Torres on this game. And the tight end seam was the most unstoppable play in the history of football, and it pissed off my friends to no end because they would do everything to try to stop it, and you couldn't. I would just throw the tight end seam up to the 6'7" tight end. He'd catch it every time.
So you know how you can have GM mode in Madden?
Yeah.
Will we get to a point where the college football EA Sports will have NIL mode?
Oh, certainly. Once they get the rights thing all figured out, and it's coming back, I think, right? Yeah.
You can offer that quarterback in California 3.4
Yes.
instead of Saban's final offer.
You got to manage your collective as part of Dynasty mode also. Game number 9. I love that we went from Wyoming to talking about an EA Sports game in 2003. Game number 9, Duke at Pittsburgh. The Panthers, a 7-point favorite. This is a noon Eastern, 11 a.m. Central kickoff. This is going to be one that, when you look at the records, Mike Elko in year 1, head coach at Duke, he's got a great quarterback in Riley Leonard. They're 7-3. Pittsburgh, on the other hand, slipped a bit this year from expectations.
Yep.
From what we saw early in the year, gave a really good fight against Tennessee, beat West Virginia in the opener. They had that horrible loss to Georgia Tech, but still here they are, Hutton, a touchdown favorite against a 7-3 Duke team. I think this has a chance to be a really good game in the ACC. Pittsburgh coming in at 6-4 on the season.
A lot of respect for Pitt here because of their consistency. You know, they're losing more than what I thought they would, but if you start looking at the final scores across college football, it's not like they've mailed it in, right?
Yeah.
And you know, Duke's been consistent as well. I mean, we've seen them on the road against Kansas, for instance. So, yeah, this is one I'm actually interested in to see what the final score ends up being because I do think Duke is a live dog here.
Yeah, so the most I watched of Duke this year, full disclosure, was that heartbreak against North Carolina, where they should have beat one-loss North Carolina and had it ripped from them in the end in heartbreaking fashion. But Mike Elko's done a heck of a job with Duke. David Cutcliffe did one of the great coaching jobs in college football in his time there at Duke, but it slipped a little bit late in his tenure, and Mike Elko's coming in and done a terrific job. Game number 8, Georgia at Kentucky. We're going to the SEC for the first time. Bulldogs, a 22.5-point favorite in this one. We're going to get into something I wrote for OutKick about the 5 biggest storylines I'm watching this week. And it's going to factor into that a little bit with this one. Here's what I think about Kentucky, though, Hutton. We actually chose this for our 6th and Peabody IPA parlay. I think the Wildcats cover in this game, and here's why. This is a pride game for Kentucky. And while Will Levis has been terrible, while they have not been able to run the football the way they want, while the defense hasn't been as aggressive as they want this year, I think Kentucky, after that abysmal performance and a loss to Vandy at home, I think they bow up and show some pride in this game. They're not going to come close to Georgia, but I don't think it's an utter blowout. I think they show themselves pretty well in this game, and I think they lose by 17, 20 points. That's why I'm picking Kentucky to cover in this game. Here's what you need about Georgia. They're great. They're the best team in the country. They also have had times this year where they haven't been terrific. The offense moves the ball when it has to every single time. The Georgia defense will bail them out every time they make a mistake. They've had turnovers, though, lately, 7 in the last 3 games for Georgia. Kentucky's got to run the football in this one. That's going to be very difficult against Georgia's front. But something about this, even with Kentucky's offensive line not playing well recently, Hutton, I feel like Kentucky's going to do enough to keep this thing somewhat close to where they can cover the spread. Again, I'm not picking anything crazy. I think this is more like a 17, 20-point game and not covering the 22.
What you're saying is you believe Stoops.
I think Kentucky shows some pride.
You believe Stoops, and we're not accusing him of this last year. It was just kind of funny how it turned out at the end. Some of how he approached the second half looked as though they were trying to cover in Athens instead of win the game in Athens. Is that what you're saying happens tomorrow? Because I think, and I came in this morning and you said you wanted to take the points, and I went with you here because you've won your fair share of these and I've lost them. I think this could end up being a lot like Tennessee and Kentucky. Think about what Georgia did to Hendon Hooker in the pass rush.
Yeah.
You think Will Levis is going to have an easy day there?
Yeah, I mean,
No.
look, I think Kentucky's chances is to lose.
And I'm not saying win. I'm saying
this needs to be
cover.
like a 30-10 type game to cover. And I think that's what it could be, 31-10, and they cover. Right? I mean, that's, again, I'm just saying I think Kentucky shows some pride in this game and doesn't get completely wiped off the field.
Well, the way
I
to
do
do
think
that,
this is a program pride type moment where you're now on CBS in the main game and you just lost to Vandy. Teams with pride respond one way, and they fight and they play hard defense, they play well, and they don't embarrass themselves. When you've lost the team for that year, and that may be the case, they get blown out quickly in this game.
Yeah, they've lost 4 of 6 since they started 4-0. You mentioned Rodriguez. He's their hope. They need like a kick return for a touchdown early. They need a play that they have been working on offensively that they have not shown, trick play, whatever you want to call it. Something that will get Will Levis involved more with the talent that everyone's telling us that is going to the NFL draft in the first round. Because coaching-wise, offensive coordinator versus Kirby Smart's defense, it's a no contest. Throw in the towel in this.
No,
They've got to get creative, and they need something big early just to get on the board, and then that's how you backdoor cover this.
Yeah, Scarangelo may be skedaddling out of town after one season as offensive coordinator at Kentucky. Game number 7. This is one I think is going to be a lot closer than Georgia-Kentucky. Texas at Kansas. This game is at 3:30 Eastern on FS1. This is another game that's going to tie into some storylines we're going to discuss a little bit later in college football. This game might not end up being that crazy 57-56 Kansas win a year ago where Kansas won at Texas, but this is a really cool time to be a Kansas Jayhawk football fan. They're bowl eligible. They've already exceeded expectations. They've done so without Jalen Daniels, their star quarterback, for a lot of this season. He should be back for this game. He's working hard to try to get back to play in this one in Lawrence. This is a house money type team with Kansas. Already bowl eligible for the first time in many years. Yeah. They play rival Kansas State next week. They're going to let it loose, have fun like they've done all year. Texas, some pressure on them right now. They're 6-4. Season's a disappointment already. You want to see it be even more disappointing? Lose your final 3 of the year. Lose this one again to Kansas for a second straight year. Then they go to Texas Tech next week. So I think it's going to be a good, high-scoring game. Texas, a 9-point road favorite in this one.
Yeah, and it feels off, just like the TCU spread last week.
Especially with Jalen Daniels possibly coming back. It feels off. If it was still the backup Bean at quarterback for
Kansas,
Kansas,
time is this
maybe.
kickoff?
This game is kicking off at 3:30 Eastern on FS1.
DVR.
Yeah, that's a prime time to DVR. But you know what, Hutton? You know what it's going up against? Georgia, Kentucky. This is going to be a lot closer. We may end up watching more of this.
Fair enough.
Than Georgia,
Yeah,
Kentucky,
right.
depending on how Kentucky comes out.
Although I like the car accident. Do
you want to see a car accident? Do you want to see an offensive car accident? Let's go ahead and scroll up to game number 6 if you want to see an offensive car accident. Iowa at Minnesota, 3 p.m. Eastern on Fox. Matty Ice, our resident Iowan, is in here, and he's just beaming right now, smile ear to ear, thinking about all those fullback dives we're going to see in this game for Iowa as the Hawkeyes go to Minneapolis. It's going to be a cold weather game. Minnesota, a 2.5-point favorite going into this one. So crazy time for the Big Ten West. We'll talk a little bit more about it later. But Illinois has got to play Michigan this week. If Illinois loses, they're a 17-point underdog. Iowa will win the Big Ten West if they win this game and beat a terrible Nebraska team on Black Friday next week. That's all they got to do. They control their own destiny. Iowa, we've been making fun of their offense all year. They have in the palm of their hand, 2 wins, and they're in the Big Ten championship game. Minnesota's got to win to stay in the race for the Big Ten West, and they're getting Iowa at home as a 2.5-point favorite. It's going to be a low-scoring game, but it should be a good game, competitive, close game.
I can't.
Hutton, you will not be watching.
I can't watch this game.
No. We'll just skip right past Fox in that 2:30 window for this game.
I cannot watch this game. I'm sorry, Chad.
You know what would make me want to watch this game? Snow. Hey,
I don't even know if that would make me want to
Hudson,
watch.
our resident meteorologist, about to give me a thumbs up or thumbs down on whether or not there's going to be snow in the forecast in Minnesota. They do play in an outdoor venue there in Minnesota. This is not indoors like the Vikings.
I am good for like 1 or 2 Iowa Hawkeyes games a year, and I do not want it to be the Big Ten championship game as one of those 2 games.
Your eyes start to like concave at some point if you
Yes.
watch too much Hawkeyes offensive football throughout the year. Even their fans, I think, have said this throughout time. So there comes a point where you just can't watch anymore. We got snow there, Davey? Yes or no? Doesn't know. Can't find it. We need quicker on the draw right there. You know what I'm going to say right now, Hutton? Snow.
It was 24 points, though, that they put on Wisconsin last week. So congratulations, Hawkeyes.
Game number 5 this week. Ole Miss at Arkansas. Hey, there was snow on the ground last week in Fayetteville, Arkansas, before that game started. Ole Miss, a 2.5-point road favorite at Arkansas. This game at 6:30 Central Time on SEC Network. If KJ Jefferson is going to play, we don't know. Thought he was going to play last week. He didn't. Arkansas still had a great chance at upsetting LSU a week ago. How accurate can he be in this game? Running game really drives the boat for both of these teams in this one. I think Ole Miss is going to get it done because they've got the better run game. In a matchup, Hutton, with 2 teams that are going to run the football.
Yeah, by about 50 yards. They're right there. Is it second and third? Or no, the Rebels lead the conference in rushing yards per game. Arkansas is third. The difference, Chad, is thinking about Arkansas's defensive effort, their best overall defensive effort of the season last week against LSU.
Right.
No, they lost, but can they repeat that same performance against Ole Miss, who's coming off of a very emotional loss to Alabama? I would take the Rebels.
I'm with you. Hutton, I've got good and bad news for you. The good news is you can go right back to not watching Iowa, Minnesota.
Yes.
Because the bad news is there's no snow in the forecast. So maybe no reason to watch that game. If you like offense, definitely no reason to watch that game. Game number 4, TCU at Baylor. I was listening to a podcast on the way in with some sports gambling picks. And whoever it was in the podcast was heavy on Baylor winning this game outright at home. TCU, a slight road favorite, 2.5. This is another one. If you're Tennessee, if you're USC, if you're one of these teams on the outside that are trying to get into the college football playoff, you are rooting hard for John McClain's Baylor Bears at home this week. The Horned Frogs, a 2.5-point favorite. Baylor wants to run the football. They want to win time of possession. They want to drain the defense. We saw it a week ago. TCU can play some defense if they need to. They did not give up an offensive touchdown, and they gave up 199 total yards a week ago in Austin, that win over Texas. But does Baylor have enough to get past TCU, a team that can run it, a team with Max Duggan who can run it, they can throw it? Hutton, TCU has passed every test this year. We keep putting them up there for, hey, this might be the week someone, and they keep getting past teams even in close games. Does it happen again this week?
And Miller, the running back, has a touchdown in 11 consecutive games. Chad, Baylor wants to run it 60% of their offensive play calls. The question is, on the other 40%, what does that mean on the scoreboard? And I think TCU showed me last week they're totally fine playing this style of game and against this style of opponent. So maybe they don't reach 30 points yet again. But I'm more confident now in TCU than I was 2 weeks ago, and I still feel like there should be a hiccup in the road. Yep. But I don't know why we're picking this one to be the week.
I don't either. I'm done picking against TCU. That's a special group. That they keep passing the test. They keep finding ways.
And
I think they do so again this week at Baylor. If it didn't happen at Texas last week, I don't think it's happening at Baylor this week.
So Baylor wants to run it. TCU allows 3.8 yards per rush. That's like 4th in the Big 12. It's fine. So I don't think that's like a weakness of them that all of a sudden Baylor's able to exploit as they're right on the doorstep of achieving the college football playoff.
Game number 3. Let's stay in the Big 12. Well, Big 12 for now with one of these teams. Bedlam, baby. Oklahoma State at Oklahoma.
I'm glad
the
this is on here.
Sooners, a 7.5-point favorite, 7:30 Eastern Time kickoff on ABC. Rough first season for Brent Venables. We know about that. I think, though, this is a good spot for Oklahoma just because of the uncertainty around Spencer Sanders. Mike Gundy's kid, not as good as Spencer Sanders, started at quarterback last week. Sanders had to come in injured to bail out West Virginia in the game. Did not look very healthy. May try to give it a go this week. If Spencer Sanders is healthy, I like the Cowboys in this matchup. But in Norman, even if Sanders is going maybe 60, 70% good to go, I think Eric Gray is the best player on the field in this game for Oklahoma, and the Sooners get it done.
Enjoy Bedlam while you can.
It's going away once Oklahoma leaves. Mike Gundy's adamant about that. Game number 2. It is a Pac-12 weekend, ladies and gentlemen. Utah at Oregon. Pac-12 after dark. Hutton will be up for every solitary second of this game.
I'm in for these.
9:30 Eastern Time on ESPN. Defending Pac-12 champion, Utah. They've still got a chance. They win this game. They beat Colorado.
Both of them do.
They're going to be playing for, well, yes, Oregon, absolutely. Oregon with a surprise loss last week, but Utah sort of left for dead earlier in the season. They're a winning team, too.
And they could be. The Rose Bowl's also up for grabs here, right?
They got to do it, yes. They got to do it on the road, though, Hutton. But they're a 2-point favorite at Oregon. I think that loss last week to Washington really changed a lot of minds about this Oregon Ducks team, especially because it came in Eugene.
And Utah embarrassed Oregon in their 2 meetings last year. You know, the coaching matchup, all of it. So the recent losses for Oregon and UCLA have really dampened some of the matchups this weekend, but they can still play spoiler a bit down the stretch. And I'm sure many of the if you're a fan of some programs on the East Coast or in the heartland of America, you're rooting for that to happen.
Yeah, and you're right. Blowout loss a year ago in Salt Lake City, and then another bad loss in the Pac-12 championship game for Oregon against this Utah team a year ago. And here it is, Utah now standing in their way of a possible Pac-12 championship again.
And Oregon allows, on average, 34 points per game to ranked opponents. It's got to be a high-scoring game for them to win it at home.
I have a feeling, though, that Oregon's going to bounce back at home. But what does Vegas know? They know that Utah matches up very well with this Oregon team. That's why they're a road favorite in this game. Game number 1. Drum roll. We're staying in the Pac-12. USC at UCLA. USC, the Trojans, a 2.5-point favorite. This game is going to be on at 7 p.m. Central Time on Fox. The Battle of Los Angeles, Hutton. This is an elimination game for the playoff for the Pac-12. It's plain and simple. If UCLA wins at home at the Rose Bowl as a 2-point underdog, a lot of people, a lot of fans that are rooting for other teams to get in the back part of that college football playoff will be rooting like crazy for Chip Kelly's team on Saturday night. I think this eliminates any hope of the Pac-12 having a representative in the Pac-12 in the college football playoff. USC is their lone chance right now. Here's another thing about this game, Hutton. Caleb Williams. This is a Pac-12 after sunset game. This ain't Pac-12 after dark. This is prime time. This is Fox.
Yep.
This is a network. This is a chance for Caleb Williams in a high-profile game to up that Heisman stock in a big way.
That's why I said he was 5th in the odds this week, Chad. But he's plus 1,500. But he is going to be in the primetime matchups moving forward now with momentum because they're going to be the big debate if they continue to be the one-loss team, right?
Yep.
And UCLA, I know they're at home. This should be a home atmosphere for USC based on the home crowds we've seen all year for the Bruins. I mean, they've been awful.
They've been non-existent.
They haven't even allowed fans in the end zones. They don't even, so they don't have to clean up after like 3 people who sit there.
I think you can just walk in and get a sideline pass right now.
Here's the thing.
Just come on down. Let's go.
This is a sign of the times in college football. With this rivalry matchup. So you have Dorian Thompson-Robinson.
Yep.
He is in his 5th matchup in this rivalry. Meanwhile, USC will play 40 different transfers, and this is their first game in this rivalry matchup.
Yeah, welcome to college football 2022, where you've got 85 free agents every year on every roster, and everyone could look a little bit different, could look slightly different or very different depending on the year. Top 10 games, quickly, I'm going to run through all of them. Boise State at Wyoming at number 10. Duke at Pittsburgh in the ACC at number 9. Georgia, Kentucky, the 3:30 Eastern CBS game at number 8. Game number 7, Texas at Kansas. 6, Iowa at Minnesota. 5, back to the SEC for Ole Miss at Arkansas. 4, TCU at Baylor. 3, Oklahoma State at Oklahoma. And then Pac-12 games at 2 and 1. Utah at Oregon. Pac-12 After Dark on ESPN. USC at UCLA, the game of the week. 8 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Central on Fox.
So this is, just briefly, this is a great example of the lack of depth and perception of the Big Ten. Illinois, Michigan is not in your top 10.
They were one of the 3 that I had to cut, but they weren't the first cut. They were deeper down. They were probably the first. Sorry, they were the first one cut off the list to not make the top 12.
Illinois, who was 7-1.
When I'm looking at 13 or 14
they've
games.
lost 2 straight.
They're a 17-point underdog to Michigan.
And it's on ABC.
Yeah. I don't
Not
think it's
top
going to be
10.
close.
Hit us up with your thoughts at OutKick 360. Coming up, outright winners this weekend for underdogs in the NFL. I've got 3 for you that I'm playing at outkick.com/bet. Hope you'll join along as well. And then Danny Kanell joins us in 15 minutes on OutKick 360.
College football's in trouble. There's a lot of people trying to keep it from happening.
I think it's a general consensus across the college football landscape. We want to play football.
College football is a huge part of the fall. It's a huge part of Americana itself.
It just really felt like people in the country needed college football to just feel a little sense of normal.
Big news from the Big Ten as the conference releasing its 10-game football schedule.
We go home thinking there's going to be practice the next day. Everybody gets a text, stay home, everything's canceled.
Big Ten fall football season has been canceled.
We just believe collectively there's too much uncertainty.
I guess what I'm trying to understand, though, Kevin, is that was the same position you had 6 days ago.
The Big Ten is an unmitigated disaster.
There was a ton of confusion. There was presidents saying one thing, there was coaches saying another.
Players had to be silent, coaches had to be silent, ADs had to be silent.
People said, how does what you just did make any sense?
And nobody really knew what the heck happened when they voted to cancel the season.
You make this huge historical announcement, and then Kevin Warren never does a press conference to explain it. It was like a masterclass on how not to handle a crisis.
The word really that was lacking in all of this is transparency.
It felt like a lot of stuff was happening behind closed doors.
Even today, we still don't know what occurred.
So you don't tell us parents, that's fine, but you're not telling the young men that it affects.
We have to make a decision to save the season. What about the history books? What about the rivalry games? What about Paul Bunyan's axe? How is that not going to go to a team this year?
This is a failure of epic magnitude. The Big Ten presidents and leaders should be held accountable for the disastrous decisions that they're making.
Then the commissioner doubles down, saying his decision will not be revisited.
And that's the point. It felt like a war was declared on the Big Ten and Kevin Warren.
Everything turned political.
Because if this is medical, then you would have stopped the game of football a long time ago.
I think the Big Ten leaders will tell you that they probably made a mistake in hindsight.
If I had the chance to do it all over last year, I would make the same decisions that we made.
6th and Peabody, our location with Yeehaw Beer and Old Smoky Moonshine. Glad you're with us. Week 11 is here across the NFL, and that means it is time to head over to OutKick.com/bet. OutKick.com/bet is where you can join us for our NFL underdog winners. I've got 3 of them for you this week. And, Chad, I'm starting in Atlanta. The Chicago Bears are winning this week in Atlanta. Battle of the run games. I get it. Arthur Smith, he's very good when it comes to just running the football. They don't want to throw it. Neither does Justin Fields. But the difference is Justin Fields is coming into his own. He's been excellent as of late. And Atlanta, I know, 10 days to prepare here. Their next 4 opponents, very winnable. The Bears, though, to me, have turned a corner a bit offensively. And they lost to the Lions 31-30. But if you'd have told me that Bears offense in the first month of the season was going to be putting up 30 points and I was going to be confident in them, I would have told you, you're crazy. The Falcons' last opponent was the Panthers. This season, 0-8 if you play the Panthers and then turn around and try to win a game the week following. Justin Fields has been sacked 36 times. That's awful. But he leads the NFL with 48 runs for a first down. I think they control the clock. I think that Chicago wins a very fun, entertaining game. I would take them on the money line. I'm taking the Jets as well. The Patriots have owned the Jets. The Jets are 6-3. The Patriots at 5-4 sit at the bottom of their division, a very good division. The Jets have allowed just 15.9 points per game over their last 6 games. I think that carries over. 5 of those 6 games have been wins. Give me the Jets winning in Foxborough against a team that traditionally they do not win against. Mac Jones has averaged 5.2 yards per attempt in his last 2 games. Now, granted, those are both wins for the Patriots, but this is a different secondary. Sauce Gardner and company, I think, wreak havoc on any time they try to pass the football this week. I'm taking the Jets on the road to win and keep the momentum going. They're going to be 7-3 going into Thanksgiving weekend. And Chiefs and Chargers, interesting here because I normally don't bet against Kansas City. This is flexed into Sunday Night Football because this has been a really good matchup between Herbert and Mahomes since Justin Herbert came to the league. Give me the Chargers because their backs are against the wall in this. They've got to win. They are banged up. It feels like a last stand game for them. And Chad, I think the roll the dice type mentality on 4th down at some point pays off. My money's going to ride a little money with the Chargers. Let's go.
$5 parlay pays $83 if you hit that.
Danny Kanell next.
Hey, listen, if you missed my show, don't at me. I've got you covered. Take a look. So I saw a headline, and maybe it was OutKick, maybe it was somewhere else. And maybe it was you. Hell, I don't know. Auburn would have interest in Dabo Swinney. And I thought to myself, well, no kidding. Would Dabo Swinney have interest in Auburn?
Yes. I think Dabo Swinney would have interest in Auburn. Yes.
Oh.
I think you would. I think you would. I think that, if here's what it's always been about Dabo, and I'm trying to be careful with my words here, but was it ever going to be the Alabama situation that a lot of people thought, Dabo's going to end up at Alabama after Nick Saban's done? I don't know if you could say that now. Does the ACC, does it get old? Do you see Dabo as a lifer? Here's what I'll add to that. Remember last season? It's hard to forget because it was one of the craziest coaching cycles we've ever seen, where Lincoln Riley leaves somewhere in Oklahoma where everybody thought he would be a lifer and ends up at USC. Brian Kelly dips out of Notre Dame, heads down to Baton Rouge. Mario Cristobal goes to Miami. I'm just saying, the days of us being shocked by coaches that are leaving for other schools and other opportunities, I think are gone. And here's something else too as well. Do not be shocked to hear that Dabo Swinney's agent reached out to Auburn to gauge interest, to see what Auburn was thinking. That's also a very smart move by the agent. because when Clemson starts getting out of the limelight, okay, well, Dabo's like, okay, well, I need to make myself known a little bit more, like, and not known in that sense. I'm talking money-wise. Let's get, let everybody is kind of maybe taking me for granted a little bit at Clemson. Let's see what it looks like if my name starts getting floated for other jobs.
9 to 11 Eastern time at OutKick.com.
What's up, guys? Tune in every Monday, Wednesday, and Thursday at 7 p.m. Eastern as I break down all the hot topics and share my final thoughts. But in case you missed an episode, here is what you missed. Contrary to popular belief, you can listen to and respect someone's point of view without absorbing it. I have some final thoughts. Folks, it's the week after midterms, and yeah, our country is divided, and yeah, it's getting worse. But here's the deal. I believe we do all want what's best for this country. We just have different ways of going about it, and that's fine. This political climate has driven us so far apart, we've forgotten how to agree to disagree. We've also been conditioned to steer clear of religion and politics, especially conservatives. The fear of discussing religion and politics has led to an inability to navigate difficult conversations about difficult topics. That needs to change. How the heck are we going to change anything if we don't step up and speak our minds? Free speech isn't just saying what you want to say, it's also hearing what you don't want to hear. And I've heard from countless people, particularly young people, who are afraid to say what they want to say for fear of being labeled, rejected, shunned, or even physically attacked. And that BS, it has to change. Political correctness is intellectual dishonesty, so stand up, speak out, find your voice, and use it. Take it from someone who is labeled too controversial on a daily basis. When you live, speak, and stand without fear, everything changes. And if that's controversial, so be it. And that's why I stand up for the average American, for law enforcement, ranchers, farmers, veterans, military, our flag, our national anthem. I'm going to ruffle feathers.
Happy Friday to you. Glad you're with us as we broadcast live in Music City, Nashville, Tennessee, and across the OutKick network, discussing all things college and NFL football. 6th and Peabody with Yeehaw Beer and Old Smoky Moonshine. Danny Kanell about to join us. We discussed earlier in the week, Chad, with Drake May and the lack of pub, the lack of hype behind North Carolina's quarterback, and how many of the average college football fan poll, if we walk down the street, are you a college football fan? Yes. How many losses does Carolina have? I don't think they would say one. I think it would be more than that. I think they would guess.
For sure.
And Drake May and the numbers he's been putting up this year and the lack of buzz about that. I realize we're talking about it, but not to the extent as you would expect for a newcomer on the college football scene that's doing what he's doing at Carolina and with a chance to go win an ACC championship. Danny Kanell will join us in a matter of minutes. Later, we will get into the top NFL matchups for this weekend, and we'll roll through some of our favorite games on Week 11.
So going back to Drake May, had this discussion with someone in our YouTube chat, or maybe it was on OutKick 360 Twitter. You can follow us at OutKick 360 and interact with us that way about Drake May, and they said, no one from that basketball conference is going to win or be in Heisman contention. I said, well, what about Lamar Jackson was the name that popped to it. And they said, well, go look at his stats. He had over 5,200 all-purpose yards. Drake May, with 4 games left, could surpass that. Could get to Lamar Jackson-type numbers without rushing the same way. But he runs the ball too. But the combination is incredible. When you look at his stat line is mind-boggling this year.
Danny Kanell joining us courtesy of Bet Online. You can visit that, betonline.net. Updated college football playoff conference, Heisman, and college football Week 12 lines. Danny, good to have you on the show, man. Hope things are well.
What's up, fellas? It's a pleasure to be on, man. Congrats on all your success. Been a fan here for a while. Pumped to be on for the first time.
We're a big fan of yours, man. Too. I was telling Hutton before this segment, one of my cousins grew up in Orange Park, Florida, outside of Jacksonville, was a big Florida State fan, and you're his guy. Like every time I take a Danny Kanell, I think that's my cousin David's guy. That's who he'd always reference as his favorite Florida State quarterback as a Seminoles fan. I'm curious of your take, Danny, on just the state of the ACC and where I really feel there's a vacuum there for a Florida State that someone can step into. Florida State's a great candidate, where it's Clemson. They're not as dominant right now, and the rest of the conference, some teams are getting better, some aren't. What do you think about Florida State being that next program to step up?
Oh, look at you guys coming with a softball to start it off to butter me up. I like it, though. I'm not going to push back. So I think you're right. Clemson, I think there's two teams. I think Clemson and Bama, I think you're seeing some cracks in the foundations of those dynasties that have taken place over the last decade of college football. But with Clemson specifically, last year got off to a rough start. They were able to win out, able to get a 10-win season, which was really impressive for Dabo. I thought last year might have been the coaching job, maybe the best coaching job he's had in his career there. But you're seeing like some struggles with the offense now, and probably the biggest cause for alarm with Clemson was the game they got pushed around against Notre Dame. And that was rough to watch, and to see them get physically manhandled like that. And that's just one of the many problems. Like DJ Uiagalelei is still not panned out where he's met the expectations, which granted are off the charts, but that's what it should be at Clemson. So it feels like they're vulnerable. The offense feels stale, and they're not as dominant as they've been. So yeah, that opens the door. And I thought Florida State this year played them as tough as they have in 5 years. I think if they played them again, actually, Florida State's gotten healthier and they've built more and more confidence with Jordan Travis. I think that game would be really intriguing, but we don't get to play them again. But you're right. And I think this year was so massive for Mike Norvell and the Seminoles because the Deion stuff is out there. It's real, right? And Florida State fans are well aware of Deion and the success he's had at Jackson State and how his name has come to the forefront of potentially getting a next job. So it was really important for Mike Norvell to have a big year this year. And it started off awesome. They get the win against LSU, but then they had that 3-game skid. And at least it was good teams, and they were in them in the fourth quarter. Like the NC State game, still one that stings a little bit because it felt like it should have won that one. But the most important thing is they bounce back. And if they can finish out, which I think they will, they have Louisiana as their 24-point favorite. The look-ahead line to Florida, I think, is a touchdown. They have to win those two. But if you go in and you're 9-3 in the regular season, you win your bowl game, that's a 10-win season. That's a pretty good turnaround story. And then most importantly, you build that momentum in the recruiting game, NIL, transfer portal, which Mike Norvell has done an outstanding job getting the right guys, not the most talented, but the right guys for the program. So yeah, I'm with you. I think Florida State is primed to fill that void.
If you're Georgia Tech, do you hire Deion Sanders? And on the flip side of that, if you're Deion Sanders, do you leave for Georgia Tech or do you wait for something better?
So I think you nailed it the way you set up that question, because yeah, you go after Deion. Actually, you know what? I don't know if it makes sense for either side. Here's why. I mean, Georgia Tech is an academic institution that prides itself on, having a higher standard. And that's restrictive in the recruiting game. I think that's why, Georgia's owned the state, but it wasn't that long ago that Georgia Tech was playing for ACC championships. But you guys know this. Paul Johnson was running a unique system, which minimized the talent gap because he's running the triple option. So I actually think that's the direction they should go. And I think Deion knows that. Like, Deion needs to go to a place where they're going to say, here's a check and do whatever you want. And we're going to back you no matter what. We understand that you're going to be the face of the program, that you're a brand. But here's the thing about Deion that I don't know if everybody's aware of, or at least they're starting to become aware of. He's a really good football coach. Man, I and even myself have come to this reality because, I'm a traditional guy. Even, he played at Florida State. He was all flash, the chains, prime time, neon Deion, pick whatever nickname you want to go with. That's not really my style. And I'd be like, can that work as a coach? But if you watch him in some of the series that are behind the scenes and you see the interaction he has with his players, he runs a tight ship. It's not what you would expect. Like, he's disciplined. He holds his players to a high standard. He works them really hard, and they come ready to play, and they're physical. I think, don't believe, everything on the outside. Like, that is a facade. But underneath it, I think there's a lot of substance. When I think a lot of people might think there's nothing there, there's a lot of substance, and he is uber competitive. I think he wants to be special. So I think for both parties, I think it makes sense for him to go somewhere else where he can have, where they understand what he is, but they can also give him the type of players that he needs and the resources he needs. Because I think he's gonna succeed wherever he goes.
Danny Kanell with us on OutKick 360, courtesy of BetOnline.net. Danny, how pissed off are you going to be if a one-loss Tennessee gets in over conference champion for the playoff?
Depends. Which conference champion are we talking?
Let's say it's one loss USC in the Pac-12.
That will bother me more. I thought you were going to go with a softball and say Clemson is the ACC champ, but I think Tennessee would have a better.
Too far down.
Yeah,
right.
It feels like Clemson and North Carolina have too much ground to make up where they are in the rankings right now, right?
Right, for sure. It does without chaos ensuing, and who knows what's going to happen Michigan Ohio State game. We'll see. But if that's close, it sure feels like you could potentially see 2 Big Ten teams and 2 SEC teams. But I wouldn't be that upset, man. I've been really impressed with Tennessee. I really have. I talked to Josh Heupel yesterday on my radio show and just blown away in year 2 that he could have this thing on the cusp. And it does feel like, I'm sure you guys have talked a ton about this. I mean, it feels like they kind of control their own destiny. They went out. They should jump in there. But USC sitting there at 7, 2 spots behind, does have a massive game against a top 25 opponent. UCLA is 16th right now that they could win. If they win that, then they have Notre Dame, who's another top 25 team. Like slowly, USC's resume starts to become better than Tennessee's. So if it was just those 2, I think you would, and this all comes in the eyes of the committee, and this is the thing that if you try to figure out what they're doing, don't, because you will never be able to figure it out because it's a moving target and it's a different crew every time, that they can come up with any excuses they want to explain away their 4 teams. But I would think in that situation, USC's only loss being by 1 point on the road against a Utah team who could be their favorite against Oregon this weekend, a really good team. And there's potential also. The best case scenario for USC is if they win out and they play Utah and they beat Utah and avenge that loss. That would probably bother me. I would probably make the case for USC over Tennessee. But if it is Tennessee versus Clemson, I think it's a harder sell, to try to pound the table for. If it's TCU as a 1 loss, I think TCU is a great story. And I think if they're 13-0, they are a lock for the playoff. But if they lose, again, they're a short favorite, 2.5-point favorite against Baylor. If they lose, I think Tennessee gets in over them. So I don't have a huge problem with it. They've been a great story. And I also think I wouldn't mind. I know a lot of people don't want to see another Georgia-Tennessee game. I kind of would. Neutral site, given the crowd had a massive impact. Eric Ainge went out there and opened his mouth, and then a lot of people started. Tennessee fans
not
started,
the smartest.
What?
Yep.
Can we just acknowledge that maybe you should wait to talk trash till after the game? Once you win, then say, yeah, that place isn't loud. Of course, they woke up that Georgia crowd, and it had an impact. And there were also not 1, but 2 throws that Hendon Hooker missed that if he could have back and maybe hits on those, maybe it changes the complexion. Georgia still would be a heavy favorite again, but I wouldn't mind seeing that matchup again. If you're just looking at who stacks up and rematches and those type of things, I wouldn't mind seeing Tennessee, Georgia again.
One more hypothetical. 1 loss, Ohio State, Tennessee, and USC. Who gets in?
1 loss, Ohio State,
Let's say
losing to Michigan,
yes,
right?
So Michigan would beat Ohio State,
right,
and then they would be out of the Big Ten championship game in that scenario.
And it's Tennessee?
Tennessee, Ohio State, USC.
USC, because in this scenario, I'm saying
You're
Georgia,
saying
Michigan,
2 of those 3
TCU.
get in, or 1 of those 3?
I'm saying you get 1 because it would be Georgia, Michigan, TCU, and then there's the 4th team. Who's the 4th team?
I think it's USC. I really do. Wow. As a 1 loss. So here's the thing, and now here's the thing they would have. They would have a common opponent. Now, because they have Notre Dame that last game, they would have to win. But Ohio State was not, that was probably their worst, Northwestern was their worst performance, but that was wind aided. But if USC beat Notre Dame pretty convincingly, they'd have that edge, and they would have the conference championship over a top 25 team. And Ohio State's the Big Ten. I know we talked earlier about the ACC. It's down. It's not deep at all. The Big Ten is quickly becoming a little bit of a dumpster fire. You got coaching turnover. You're firing Paul Chryst. the West is an absolute crapshoot of who could be there, and it could be Iowa with this offense, which looks like it's playing in 1957, but they got a great defense. Like it's not going to be a resume builder, whoever Ohio State or Michigan plays. I still think I would lean USC there now. And I also think there's got to be something to Ohio State playing at home. Like if you lose at home, that to me is a pretty a rough indictment on you. And I also think the committee, as much as like people don't want to acknowledge this, I think you have to consider that the Pac-12 has been left out. What are we on, year 5 or 6? I forget how many years it is. The Pac-12 hasn't had representation in the playoff. I think that might come into play too, where they'd be like, all right, they got one loss conference champ. We kind of have to give them that opportunity. And so I think it would be USC.
Danny Kanell, our guest. Why have we not jumped on the Drake May train the same way we would for any young quarterback coming in and lighting up a Power 5 school the way he has?
I think it's pretty easy. He plays at a basketball school, and I mean, I know Mark Stoops and Coach Cal got into it over that. I think Mac Brown would probably take issue with that as well. He also plays in the ACC where the competition hasn't been great, and he hasn't had that many opportunities to play on a big stage. Like that's one thing that's really driven me nuts about the ACC is this horrendous TV
and
contract.
And Danny, the biggest stage was probably Notre Dame. That's also going against him, even though I think he put up big numbers in that game. But Notre Dame winning that big game, Yeah,
he had 5 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. Like, he's been flawless. You're right. It probably was the biggest stage. I think, was that an NBC game? I think it might have been.
It was ABC at night, I'm pretty sure, actually. Yeah. But it was a network game.
Yeah, so he played there. It was a loss, and then he's kind of an afterthought. North Carolina was an afterthought. And then, the teams he's played against, like Miami, he beat. Another great performance. That was on ABC. My guy, Dusty Dvorak, called that game, but it was kind of on a busy Saturday, and people probably aren't tuning in. And he plays Duke. It's Pitt. It's Virginia. It's Wake Forest. And all of these, by the way, several of them are field goal games where he has these incredibly high stress possessions where if he doesn't score, they lose. And if he throws a turnover, they lose by 15 or 20. And yet he's delivered every single time. But a lot of times, like, you just see him buried and Heisman voters. And I do think like the general, college fans that just kind of watch casually and, love college football, they're not going to go look for an ACC game, and I think that's a reality. I think that's a perception problem. But I do think he is right in the thick of things, and he's going to have a couple opportunities. Statistically, he should have a big game against Georgia Tech. They're a heavy favorite. He should be able to keep padding his stats, stay on pace with C.J. Stroud, where they lead the country in touchdown passes with 34. Then he's got NC State, which is a Black Friday game, which is a rivalry. And again, it's like, but there aren't that many games. And I think at that point, people will start taking notice. And then I think against Clemson, primetime ABC, that'll be his time. Where ultimately, I think in the Heisman Trophy race, I don't know if I like this or not, but it feels like the winner is going to be the MVP of Conference Championship weekend. And if you're not playing on Conference Championship weekend, I don't think you have a chance to win. And like if they all fall, I think Hendon Hooker might backdoor his way in. But it feels like C.J. Stroud, Blake Corum at Michigan, Drake May, and Caleb Williams playing at USC, if they play in it, are probably, and whoever has the best performance in the most exciting game is probably going to end up stealing the Heisman Trophy. It is pretty wide open, though. I can't remember a race that's been this close.
Chad, we were discussing this, Danny. The best value right now is out west with Williams. He's like plus 1,500 to win it. He's 5th. He has the 5th best odds, but he's about to take over the primetime slot.
Well, he's got a chance Saturday night in a primetime slot on Fox to play great against UCLA. And I also think C.J. Stroud could just lock the thing up if he's lights out against Michigan because everyone's going to watch that game.
That's fair, too.
So that's the one. He's the odds-on favorite now, and if he plays great, he probably wins the Heisman. And I'm guessing right now, with the odds, Hooker would probably finish second, but C.J. Stroud, if he plays great against Michigan's got an inside track. Danny, I want to ask you kind of a state of the program of 2 different jobs that are open, have been open for a while, and are trying to position themselves for the next coach. Just where you think those programs are and where they should go in terms of the type of coach they need. And even if you have a name for them, please throw them out. I want to start with Nebraska, who I mean, they have not been to a bowl game since 2016. They were here in town for the Music City Bowl against Tennessee. And now that Kansas is bowl eligible, that's the longest Power 5 drought for a bowl game right now. It's incredible to see how far they've fallen for such a prideful program. Where should they go next?
So I wish I could give you some real like hot take name. It was like lock it up. But I do think the name that has been out there that feels like they might go higher is actually a really good fit. And it's Matt Rule, who's, just coming off a tenure with the Carolina Panthers. But and I know Matt Rule, covered him, talked to him. I was a little bit worried about him in the NFL because he feels like a college coach. Like in college, you got to motivate the players, get them up. You got to get them to buy into the philosophy and buy into giving you effort and, kind of a rah-rah type of mentality. And Matt Rule was great at that. In the NFL, it's more about just tell me what to do. Like my paycheck is going to clear. Just tell me what to do. And if you get rah-rah, players are almost turned off by that. And I think you saw that. And then he didn't have a quarterback, which didn't help either. But we've seen him at tough programs like Temple. It's not easy to win, even though it was kind of easy. They had a nice little run there, but he kept it. And they gave Notre Dame on the national stage the run for their money when Notre Dame was in that top 5 team. Then he goes to Baylor, and I actually covered his first game at Baylor when they lost to Liberty. It was one of the biggest upsets in college football history. I think they were a 40-point favorite and lost. And then they went, I think it was 1-11, or it was a rough first year. And of course, we knew what was going on at Baylor, and it was a mess. And he had to completely turn around that program, which he did, which he parlayed into the job with the Panthers. But you've got to have somebody, I think, with experience of turning around a bit of a mess, because it is a mess at Nebraska. I mean, it's just, let's call a spade a spade. It's ugly. It's bad. And you got to have somebody I do think you have to bring in somebody that has a brand. Like I think Lance Heupel would be a great hire. I don't know if he sells to the boosters and brings a lot of excitement. I think he should, but I don't think he would. We saw the Scott Frost experiment. Like he was it looked perfect on paper, and then it just collapsed because I think of his inexperience, maybe just was a little bit too early for him. But Matt Rule's got a history with this. He's done this before, and I think he really could infuse some life in there. And I think he's a good football coach. And I think they have deep pockets where they could start spending for the right types of players. I think that's the one thing we're starting to learn is you can go out and buy, now that's legal, you can buy recruiting classes, you can buy transfer portal, but you got to buy the right guys. And you got to, or just recruit the right guys, bring in the right guys. And they have to be guys that buy into the culture. I think Matt Rule would do a pretty good job of that. So I think he's the best name for them. I don't know if they'll go in that direction. I've heard, it's got a lot of speculation, but I think he'd be a fantastic hire if they did. And the expectation to me should be Big Ten West championships, right? I mean, isn't that what we should expect?
I mean, look at the Big Ten West this year. There's no great programs or teams. Nebraska's as good as any program in the Big Ten West. Or they should be,
and I think the expectation, I think it's fair to say they should do it fairly quickly. Like, it's not a gauntlet. It's a mess. You should be able to turn it around quickly.
So Auburn, to me, I think the target should be Lane Kiffin, and that's sort of the ceiling. And I feel like the floor is Hugh Freeze, who would gladly take that job, and I think he would do well. Do you like those two names, and are those two guys a fit? Because, as we saw, Danny, if you hire someone who's not a fit, they're going to get run out of town quickly with Brian Harsin coming from Boise, Idaho.
Yeah, I was torn with the Brian Harsin hire because it felt odd, right? It was just, and he had a good track record, but it just felt odd. And I think you're 100% right. You do have to have a good fit. And I do think either one of those guys would be a great fit because they both had success, right? In the SEC, I think they both understand what it's like to coach in the SEC, the ebbs and the flows, the ups and the downs, the expectations, the passion, the criticism that you're going to take, the boosters that are going to be involved, how you kind of have to play the game. You got to shake the right hands. You got to say the right things with the media. And both of them have a lot of experience and done it at the highest level. I'm curious what you guys think. Do you think Lane should take Auburn? Like, if you're him, because, man, it feels like he's got a good thing going at Ole Miss. You've got that ball rolling. You've earned yourself a little bit of a runway here to get a few more. Like, it's a year-by-year thing in the SEC, right? If you have one bad year, you could be on the outs. But he feels like he's earned some cachet with the Ole Miss faithful. Do you think he'd be willing to go to that, which is much more uncertain, or is there just a payday that's coming that you can't turn it down?
I don't think it's a no-brainer at all that he should take the Auburn job. I think it's a big question. You maybe should stay at Ole Miss. Auburn had success hiring one Ole Miss coach with Tommy Tuberville back in the day, hiring them away from Ole Miss. So we've seen it before. But I think you're on to something there. But Hutton, something we've talked a lot about too, Lane Kiffin outwardly flirts with other jobs every year. He's talking about attendance at games this year. He just
NIL.
seems a little bit unhappy or unsettled with the situation at Ole Miss. He wanted the Miami job a year ago by some reports. So if he wanted the Miami job, I feel like he would be interested in Auburn too, I guess would be the answer.
I know. It just, to me, I think that one could be a little – I think Hugh Freeze might be a better fit. Just – Lane's a little peculiar, right? And he does things. He's going to do some things that raise an eyebrow. And if you're winning, it's great. But if you're not, how's the Auburn faithful going to receive that? I think Lane's a great coach. But, going back to what it was said about Ole Miss, how about the fact what he said, too, about, we can't even keep our coordinators. I mean, Levy goes to Oklahoma. Durkin goes to Texas A&M. And he's like, hey, we're getting outbid. It's just reality of what happened. So maybe it is something about that. And maybe he's, a lot of coaches will use the rumors to get a higher salary. Maybe he's using it to get more certainty and more money and resources for his staff and for the NIL game. But man, I don't know. I'm curious. I mean, I would love to see it. I mean, are you kidding me? It'd be great fodder for us to talk about either one. But I think Hugh Freeze is a really good football coach. I'd love to see him get another shot in the SEC. We saw what he did at Ole Miss. He was able to beat Alabama a couple times. Like, I think he knows that landscape pretty well too. I'd love to see him get another shot too. So I think either one of those, I think if you're Auburn, you have to feel pretty good about either one. If you steal Lane Kiffin, great. If you get Lane or Hugh Freeze, who desperately, I think he wants to get back in the SEC, I think that's great too. So I think either one of those. So you're not buying into any of the Deion Sanders?
Not
when Kiffin's dropping his name.
Yeah, I think Kiffin's
so does
just
that open up the
better
whole
name.
The dominoes? Does that open up the dominoes of then if Lane goes to Auburn for Deion to go to Ole Miss?
We talked about it yesterday, Danny. Charles Barkley went on a show we're friends with, the Next Round Live in Birmingham, and dropped this bomb about Deion. He talks to Deion weekly and said there's going to be a surprise opening, a surprise firing in the SEC. And everyone immediately went to Jimbo Fisher at Texas A&M. My mind immediately went to new AD at Mississippi State. Mike Leach isn't having the best of years. His personality can rub people the wrong way within a structure, right? He's in Jackson, Mississippi now. Maybe it's Mississippi State that would go hard after Deion Sanders to move right down the road and coach them if they made a change.
Yeah, I saw those comments from Barkley and was trying to figure it out too, right? And he was trying to figure out, who's the most vulnerable. And Jimbo, I just don't think they're going to pay the $86 million. And I don't think they should. I think that'd be a really stupid move for Texas A&M. So and I think Barkley was kind of hitting it that might have been the Aggies, but I couldn't get a real read for that. I do think there were. So then I was like, there's not really anybody that the teams aren't happy with, the programs aren't happy with. I know that Deion had interviewed at Arkansas and done really well. And I was like, maybe Sam Pittman limps into the end. Is that would be a shocker though.
Yes.
If it's a shocking firing,
complete,
maybe
everyone would be surprising. I mean, to his point, there's not one
and
obvious
I love Pittman. Right. Yeah. And that's why, I love Sam Pittman. He's done a great job. I love him, but I was trying to think the same way you are. I do think maybe the Mississippi State one maybe makes the most sense, where after you can kind of read the tea, oh yeah, he is in the state. Mike Leach could rub people the wrong way. I think you could start talking yourself in there. I just have no idea what Barkley was alluding to. Again, similar to the Auburn hire, if there's a surprise firing, good for all of us. Sorry for the coach. I'm sure they'll get paid handsomely because they all have these incredible buyouts. But it would not surprise me almost anywhere.
Last thing for you, Danny Kanell with us, and just tying in all this. I'm really intrigued to see how Ole Miss handles this, because they're already paying Lane over $7 million. And the question becomes, would you pony up to pay him to keep him out of the SEC West? But if he wants to go somewhere else, you let somewhere else hire him. Or do they become Kentucky, where every time Stoops' name's mentioned, Kentucky ponies up and pays him a little bit more, and they invest, and they can do it more at Ole Miss, I guess, based on the fact they're not a basketball school. But you get my point here. I would like to know where they see themselves with Kiffin 5 years from now? And at what point does Kiffin say, you know what? I don't want to be anywhere else, because he's never going to do that. So at some point you have to determine, okay, is this a program that's always going to pay him a little bit more in order to keep him happy, or do you let him go somewhere else outside of the SEC?
First of all, can I just say something that you just made me think of? I wish all these athletic directors and school presidents would get together and stop getting played by Jimmy Sexton and all these other. Like, just let them go. If they want to go, go. There are coaches out there that are good that can, but they're all terrified. What if you lose a coach and then your program's bad and I get fired?
This is where collusion should happen. All the ADs should get together and be like, do not pay him. Jimmy's trying to hold me over the fire for this guy.
Yes.
Don't talk to them about it. Like, this is the one area where it's almost necessary to curb this out-of-control system. I'm totally with you.
Yes. And I saw, Jimbo Fisher every year at Florida State. I mean, I thought Florida State was a destination job. I'm sure Oklahoma felt they were, and Notre Dame did too. But like, at some point, just let them go. So for Lane, I mean, clearly the ceiling for Ole Miss is higher than Kentucky. We can agree on that, right?
Yep.
So like, and you're starting to see him have success where now the finish of the season is going to be fascinating because you got the Egg Bowl coming up. You got a tricky game this weekend. Like, we'll see if they finish strong, get another 10-win season. That's pretty remarkable. And you see how he embraces the NIL game. Maybe he has leveled the playing field.
And at worst, they're going 10 to 8 wins at worst.
Right.
They're not Kentucky.
Right. And maybe if they get a special quarterback, because I do worry about Jackson Dart not being that special, like that you need to win a national championship at Ole Miss. If you do get a special quarterback, like maybe you can win a national championship. And so like, if that's your goal, which every coach should be, why would you want to flirt with having to go somewhere else, which has been a mess, and do that? So I don't know. I don't know Lane like personally. I've covered him a couple times, met him. I know he's peculiar, but at some point, when does it become like, hey, this is a good thing I've got going on, and it feels like it is with, his dogs running around, his kids are there in the office. They like him. Like that's him. Yeah. Like SEC, you can't have as much buy-in as he's had from the fan base at Ole Miss. At some point, there's got to be value in that. And I hope he sticks around for that reason, but I don't know what makes him tick. And if it's, if it's keep bumping its salary, then good luck to Ole Miss trying to spend with the other teams that are willing to lure him away.
Check out Bet Online for updated college football playoff odds, conference championship odds. You've got Heisman and college football week 12 lines and much more. BetOnline.net. Danny, always great to catch up, man. And hopefully we'll do it down the road soon. And who knows, maybe we'll do it after Drake May wins the Heisman.
Let's see. We'll see. It should be fun, man. It's bittersweet, isn't it? This season going by so fast. We're already in the Heisman. It's
every
crazy.
year it does. Every year. It's a season that flies by. I'm with you.
And then there's a lull as we wait for January. Here we go.
Thanks so much, Danny. This is awesome. Thanks, bud.
Thank you, guys. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, man. There's Danny Kanell. Always great to catch up with him. CBS Sports. You got SiriusXM, of course, betonline.net for more there. Coming up, switch gears, NFL discussion, the biggest games on Sunday. Going to pick out 4 or 5 for you. Go in depth on the magnitude and the turning points for the organizations that are matched up this weekend going into Thanksgiving week. That's next on OutKick 360.
Chris was a funny guy, and not like a clown, like make you laugh funny. He's just a genuinely funny guy. But I got to the team, and they were already deployed. Team 3 was deployed to Fallujah, and I got there and had a lot of time on my hands. So I went to free fall school and sniper school. And next thing you know, the team comes back and I find out I'm in Chris's platoon. He had made a name for himself in Ramadi as a shooter. And at that point, he was just a white kid from Texas. So they called him Tex. But as a new guy sniper, Chris was really developing his reputation as the man. And if you've ever worked on a team with somebody who knows everything, like Chris was that guy. When it came to sniping, if it came time to do like diving, Chris wasn't there. He didn't like to dive and go underwater and do that whole C component of SEAL. But when it came to sniping, that was his thing. And his ability to teach people, like he would hold you to a very, very high standard. But at the end of the day, like he was there to teach you. And for a SEAL sniper, knowing that we were going to Ramadi at the 11th hour, that was huge because he could have been that guy that was like, I really don't care. You're a new guy, just pick up brass and shut up. or it's like, hey, when you're inside a sniper hide, this is how you got to set up so you don't get shot in the face. Thank you. I appreciate that. And his ability to teach young SEALs made us much, much more effective, because when we got to Ramadi, a lot of the snipers were new guy SEALs. Myself, Johnny Kim, the astronaut now, we were stepping up into those roles, and we had to be combat effective. And it wasn't for Chris, the dude who knew everything, and his ability to teach with some humor, we wouldn't have been as effective as we were. For example, like Chris' story is his humor. I discussed this in my book. We were out in the desert training. We're doing our land warfare block, and there's a little bit of team building exercises that go on late in the evening, where if you're a new SEAL hanging out with a bunch of older operators and you don't see any of your new guy buddies around, you're probably in danger. So that exact moment happened. I was out in the desert, and guys were having a couple cocktails. Look around, none of my fellow new guys were there. And then next thing you know, it's like a tsunami. You get jumped, taped up, and I wake up like a mummy, completely taped up. Like literally all my nose and my mouth were open. I was completely taped up and, strapped on a gurney and taken over in my rack and all that stuff, and left for, I thought, until I blossomed as a butterfly. And about 10 minutes later, I hear this cackling, and you could never not hear Chris's cackling coming a mile down the road. And he came down cackling. I could hear him cackling. He comes in. He's like, "Hey, buddy, you all right?" I'm like, "Yeah." And he's like, "Good. You're going to sit here for a little bit, then we'll cut you out." But that's, I think, the level that Chris would go to, whereas like some guys wouldn't care if you got taped up and left for dead. But Chris was one that he was kind of a hugger when it came to new guys. But that's what made him a great teacher, and that's what made us quite effective within his platoon.
So we obviously, what you just said about him is the guy, the teacher, the mentor. He sounds obviously as a class act individual. From the shooting standpoint, from the sniping standpoint, what made Chris Kyle when it came to getting that job done?
Yeah, he was a guy that was there for game time. He obviously put in the work. He was a great shot. There were times though that, he was not a great shot. I remember training on the range, and his target looked like he was shooting buckshot out there. And he claimed like the scope rings were loose, but ultimately, like he was the hardest worker. He was the guy who sat behind the scope just tirelessly. His eye never came off the scope. You never saw his head droop, to rest his neck. And that's like, if you're a hunter, more time in the woods is going to make you a successful hunter. And Chris, his eye was always on the scope, and his dedication to the job. When it came to recce's and finding buildings, he knew where to set up. He knew where the enemy was coming from, and he was very, very good at getting us in the right position to interdict, which ultimately saves lives when it comes to Marines and Army. But he just had an uncanny intuition as to how to hunt properly on the battlefield.
Big thanks to Danny Kanell for joining the show. OutKick 360 rolls on. 6th and Peabody, our location with EHOP Beer and Old Smoky Moonshine. If you're in Nashville for maybe a concert, you've got a convention, maybe you're coming to an NFL game from across the country, swing by here. Say hello. Grab the tasting bar, grab a spot there, all the moonshine on the wall. The kaleidoscope, Chad. The kaleidoscope.
Kaleidoscope moonshine is what we stare at every day, right through the window in front of us into the tasting room. A friendly crowd today at 6th and Peabody. A lot of people waving at us through the door. Keep it coming. We love to see people. This is a place that attracts people from all over the country to come here and experience this venue. So please, when you stop by, come say hello to us.
Let's hit the NFL top games, shall we? Some key matchups. The Bills have dropped 2 straight. They are favored by 7 in what was going to be a home game, but now both teams are on their way to Detroit. The Browns are going to bus the 2.5 hours to Detroit. And Davey Hudson, our producer of the show, is saying that Buffalo is having trouble getting out of the city, just trying to get to Detroit. So we'll keep you updated on that. The good news with Josh Allen is he's playing in this game. I don't know if there was really any doubt there, but he was on the injury report. News has come out today. He's good to go. He's going to play this week. But this is one of those, we're mentioning it here. I don't think, you're not picking the Browns, are you?
No.
Okay. But I do want to see Josh Allen get back to Josh Allen-like things. And the last 3 games, 6 combined interceptions and a fumble. That's not number 1 Buffalo Bills Super Bowl hopeful play. This is one of these games where you're now thinking, okay, this is opponent. You're supposed to go in and win, and I get it. It was supposed to be a home game. Things have been kind of topsy-turvy for them this week. They've got to get back on track before the backstretch of December where they're going to play the division games where they're currently 3rd in the division because they're 0-2 right now.
It's a critical point in their season right now with the weather situation in Buffalo, moving this game to a neutral field where you had a home game, playing an inferior team. You're a touchdown favorite. Coming off that loss, just the way they lost it was a wild game where they had it. And to lose at home that way to the Vikings, it's a disappointing 3-loss team right now. You know, there's a lot of teams around the NFL that would be thrilled to have 3 losses at this point. The Bills aren't one of them with their roster. So this is a key game to make sure you handle business. I think they will. You're right, though. Josh Allen needs to cut back on the turnovers, and he needs to start looking like himself again. I believe that starts to happen this weekend.
4 of those picks in the red zone. Jets and Patriots, speaking of the division, turning point game for the Jets. Coming off the bye against a coach and a team they traditionally do not play well against. And we've mentioned this here, Patriots favored by 3. The Jets have a 1 more win than New England. If the Jets win this game, Chad, I think they can win the division, believe it or not. They've got the Patriots. Then they have the Bears that will play the Vikings. But after that, the Bills in a rematch where they've already won. They have, to finish the season, Detroit and Jacksonville at home. This is the game for them if they are if they're the Bengals of last year. They're a year ahead of where we thought they'd be.
Yeah, and also
go win this game on the road.
Like the Bengals of last year, you get the benefit of being a bad team the previous year and matching up with other bad teams.
Exactly.
So their schedule is favorable because the NFL has the perfect structure to turn teams around quickly and pull everyone either toward the middle from the top or up towards the middle from the bottom. The Jets are reaping the rewards of that right now with this schedule, and it's been a good story. But I'm with you. I was looking at their schedule earlier this week and thinking they're going to be competitive for the AFC East. But you're right that it starts this weekend against the Patriots. That'd be another that win over the Bills in the division, and then if they could go to Foxborough, and win this one, it would be. I'm still
on the fence with them, but this is one of those where they do this, and it's kind of a prove it week. Right now, the seeds in the AFC for the playoffs, and we've got time here. We've got a stretch for the actual playoff picture. But the Jets, Bills, and Patriots are in order 5, 6, and 7 in the AFC. In the NFC, right now, the Cowboys are the 6th seed after losing this past week in Green Bay, and they're looking up at the Eagles, of course, leading the NFC East. The Vikings, they're going to win and host a game in the playoffs because they're going to win their division in the NFC North. Dallas has got to get back on track here if they have a chance of winning the division. And it's a tough trip back north before they will have a short week on Thanksgiving back in Dallas. They're favored by 1.5 against Minnesota. Minnesota coming off the win against Buffalo. But if you want to discuss playoff positioning and seeding here, this is a big one for Dallas. Not as much for Minnesota because, again, they're going to win their division. Dallas may not, even though we've seen Philly come and look human a bit, right? They
came back down to earth for one game.
Yeah, but this is an odd Vegas stance. Dallas favored by 1.5.
Strangest line of the season. Strangest. That simple. I don't get it.
Bengals and Steelers this week. And Cincinnati, after the week off, back on the road. They're favored by 4 at Heinz Field. We saw a good play, steady play from Kenny Pickett a week ago against the Saints. And while Pittsburgh's not going to make the playoffs, I don't think we're saying that we're about to see a star-studded run to the postseason. They are healthier, and they do have Tomlin. Meanwhile, Cincinnati has the expectation. And within that division, with the chases on for Baltimore and knowing that you have Deshaun Watson coming in 2 weeks to the division, Cincinnati needs this win on the road in Pittsburgh.
Cincinnati also wins the award for best team tweet of the week. When the game was announced in Buffalo to be moved to Detroit, they just tweeted out simply, breaking in all caps, our game is still in Pittsburgh. That was the breaking news. Perfect.
And that game was going to be Sunday Night Football this week. Instead, it's Chiefs at Chargers. Los Angeles hosting Kansas City, where the 7-2 Chiefs are favored by 6 points against the 5-4 Chargers on Sunday Night Football. Hardeman has been added to the injured reserve with an abdomen injury, and Kansas City's defense has given up 19 touchdown passes. They're allowing 101.6 passer rating for their opponents. Justin Herbert needs to match what we expect from Patrick Mahomes. We have seen this in the past. There was a narrative that was starting to build that this was going to be one of the best head-to-head quarterback rivalries for years to come because we saw what they did in head-to-head matchups last year. And it's time for Justin Herbert to carry the team again. And meanwhile, you've got Patrick Mahomes who, puts on a magic show every week. So Mahomes can further his I think he's rooted right now into the current MVP.
Yeah.
Herbert can call himself a playoff quarterback by winning this game because I think this is the turning point for Los Angeles. It's one way or the other. And if you want to get in, win an AFC matchup, win at home, and beat the top team right now in the AFC.
It's a big boy type moment for Justin Herbert in this matchup with
that
spotlight.
They're banged up, but the best quarterbacks make the role players around them better. Austin Eckler has really stepped up, not just in the run game, but in the pass game since we have seen Keenan Allen and Mike Williams out. But, you've got other options at receiver that are not the star-studded powerhouses that we know Williams and Keenan Allen certainly are capable of. But Justin Herbert needs to elevate the play of everyone around him. And they need to protect him here, give him some time against a Kansas City defensive front that doesn't want to blitz a whole lot. They're going to stay back and play zone. Herbert's got to be accurate, not turning the football over. And, Staley, while he wants to be aggressive against Kansas City, he needs to do it at the right times. The fourth down last year, anytime
not the right time.
Right. Yeah, be patient in this game and allow the fourth quarter to come to you and let your quarterback take over. By the way, Herbert, among the toughest dudes, I think, in the league for what he's been playing through this year. With the ribs and everything else.
He's getting hit a lot. Ever since that shot to the ribs, he's been different. But that is a pain tolerance thing that's not easy to go through. The game I'm most interested in, though, Hutton, there is that weird line game with Vikings hosting the Cowboys. I'll be tuned in for that one.
Justin Jefferson, good to go, by the way. He was on the injury report. He's playing in the Vikings matchup. We'll get you updated on the injury report across the league a bit later in the show when we come back. The World Cup gets underway on Sunday, and, Qatar has already done an about-face on something they said was going to be there that will not. This is OutKick 360.
College football's in trouble. There's a lot of people trying to keep it from happening.
I think it's a general consensus across the college football landscape. We want to play football.
College football is a huge part of the fall. It's a huge part of Americana itself.
It just really felt like people in the country needed college football to just feel a little sense of normal.
Big news from the Big Ten as the conference releasing its 10-game football schedule.
We go home thinking there's going to be practice the next day. Everybody gets a text, stay home, everything's canceled.
Big Ten fall football season has been canceled.
We just believe collectively there's too much uncertainty.
I guess what I'm trying to understand, though, Kevin, is that was the same position you had 6 days ago.
The Big Ten is an unmitigated disaster.
There was a ton of confusion. There was presidents saying one thing, there was coaches saying another.
Players had to be silent, coaches had to be silent, ADs had to be silent.
People said, how does what you just did make any sense?
And nobody really knew what the heck happened when they voted to cancel the season.
You make this huge historical announcement, and then Kevin Warren never does a press conference to explain it. It was like a masterclass in how not to handle a crisis.
The word really that was lacking in all this is transparency.
It felt like a lot of stuff was happening behind closed doors.
Even today, we still don't know what occurred.
So you don't tell us parents, that's fine, but you're not telling the young men that it affects.
We have to make a decision to save the season. What about the history books? What about the rivalry games? What about Paul Bunyan's axe? How is that not going to go to a team this year?
This is a failure of epic magnitude. The Big Ten presidents and leaders should be held accountable for the disastrous decisions that they're making.
Then the commissioner doubles down, saying his decision will not be revisited.
And that's the point. It felt like a war was declared on the Big Ten and Kevin Warren.
Everything turned political.
Because if this is medical, then you would have stopped the game of football a long time ago.
I think the Big Ten leaders will tell you that they probably made a mistake in hindsight.
If I had the chance to do it all over last year, I would make the same decisions that we made.
6th and Peabody, our location. You can find Yeehaw Beer and Old Smoky Moonshine here. Can't find that in Qatar for the World Cup. At least that's now the expectation. The move has not been officially announced. I'm reading the story from David Hookstead at OutKick.com. But they have FIFA has a $75 million licensing agreement with Budweiser. And while initially the agreement was, yes, beer will be sold on site, now officials in Qatar are removing this. And once it's announced, you can expect fans to flip out. And I would say Budweiser to flip out over the $75 million contract with FIFA.
Look, FIFA should not be surprised by this. When you sell your soul for the highest bidder and you are willing to overlook any injustice in the country, anything else going on, and you're not really focused on the overall product, you're simply focused on fattening your pockets when you are the powers that be in FIFA, this is what you get. You get an agreement, a handshake agreement, whatever it is. Oh yeah, we're going to sell Budweiser products. We're going to sell beer at the games. And then when they get the games, they're almost here. They're going to say, you know what? No, forget about that. We're not doing it. We're going to put these in some random islands of alcohol all over the country that you can go find alcohol there, but they're not going to be in the stadium for games. It's a big deal. Regardless of your thoughts on alcohol, it's a big deal to have this global stage of an event and not have the ability to purchase alcohol with a major sponsor on board of the FIFA World Cup. But again, FIFA gets what they deserve.
Well, and it's also, I think it's just an example of, okay, what else are they going to flip and change once this gets going and all the agreements are in place? Oh, we'll do this. And then the event's going, and it's like, yeah, we're not doing that. We're not going to open this. You're going to do this instead of that. It's going to get weird. And this is just like surface level stuff. Budweiser, meanwhile, tweeted out, "Well, this is awkward." That was the quote from the Budweiser social media account.
You deal with a nation that has thousands of migrant workers die making the venues for the deal and get swept under the rug. You're going to have things like this happen.
FIFA's used to that part.
Maybe they're not going to be true to their word. Shocker. Once they have the tournament that's going to be in their country and it's a week away. That needs to change. By the way, in honor of Qatar not having beer, 6 and Peabody brought me and Hutton and I a beer during the break.
Cheers.
So,
I've got the Pilsner.
Cheers.
You got the Cerveza.
World Cup won't have it, but we will. And it's going to be a hell of a last
during
hour
the World
show.
Cup here. That's right. Coming up, headlines including the Indianapolis Colts. And are they about to go 2-0 with Jeff Saturday as the head coach?
Oh, yes, they are.
How upset are some of the media going to be with that? That's next on OutKick 360.
Hey, listen, if you missed my show, don't at me. I've got you covered. Take a look. So I saw a headline, and maybe it was OutKick, maybe it was somewhere else. And maybe it was you. Hell, I don't know. Auburn would have interest in Dabo Swinney. And I thought to myself, well, no kidding. Would Dabo Swinney have interest in Auburn?
Yes. I think Dabo Swinney would have interest in Auburn. Yes.
Oh.
I think you would. I think you would. I think that, if here's what it's always been about Dabo, and I'm trying to be careful with my words here, but was it ever going to be the Alabama situation that a lot of people thought, Dabo's going to end up at Alabama after Nick Saban's done? I don't know if you could say that now. Does the ACC, does it get old? Do you see Dabo as a lifer? Here's what I'll add to that. Remember last season? It's hard to forget because it was one of the craziest coaching cycles we've ever seen, where Lincoln Riley leaves somewhere in Oklahoma where everybody thought he would be a lifer and ends up at USC. Brian Kelly dips out of Notre Dame, heads down to Baton Rouge. Mario Cristobal goes to Miami. I'm just saying, the days of us being shocked by coaches that are leaving for other schools and other opportunities, I think are gone. And here's something else too as well. Do not be shocked to hear that Dabo Swinney's agent reached out to Auburn to gauge interest, to see what Auburn was thinking. That's also a very smart move by the agent, because when Clemson starts getting out of the limelight, okay, well, Dabo's like, okay, well, I need to make myself known a little bit more, like, and not known in that sense. I'm talking money-wise. Let's get, let everybody is kind of maybe taking me for granted a little bit at Clemson. Let's see what it looks like if my name starts getting floated for other jobs.
9 to 11 Eastern Time at OutKick.com.
What's up, guys? Tune in every Monday, Wednesday, and Thursday at 7 p.m. Eastern as I break down all the hot topics and share my final thoughts. But in case you missed an episode, here is what you missed. Contrary to popular belief, you can listen to and respect someone's point of view without absorbing it. I have some final thoughts. Folks, it's the week after midterms, and yeah, our country is divided, and yeah, it's getting worse. But here's the deal. I believe we do all want what's best for this country. We just have different ways of going about it, and that's fine. This political climate has driven us so far apart, we've forgotten how to agree to disagree. We've also been conditioned to steer clear of religion and politics, especially conservatives. The fear of discussing religion and politics has led to an inability to navigate difficult conversations about difficult topics. That needs to change. How the heck are we going to change anything if we don't step up and speak our minds? Free speech isn't just saying what you want to say, it's also hearing what you don't want to hear. And I've heard from countless people, particularly young people, who are afraid to say what they want to say for fear of being labeled, rejected, shunned, or even physically attacked. And that BS, it has to change. Political correctness is intellectual dishonesty, so stand up, speak out, find your voice, and use it. Take it from someone who is labeled too controversial on a daily basis. When you live, speak, and stand without fear, everything changes. And if that's controversial, so be it. And that's why I stand up for the average American, for law enforcement, ranchers, farmers, veterans, military, our flag, our national anthem. I'm going to ruffle feathers, and I'm going to ignite debate. I'm going to speak my mind and inspire.
Just like that, the final hour is here. Friday edition of OutKick 360 with Chad Withrow. I'm Jonathan Hutton. And, Chad, we've got a look at your top 5 college football storylines that's coming up in about 15 minutes. Looking forward to this. The column's already available at OutKick.com. And there are plenty of storylines now as we see the positioning, not just for the college football playoff, but impactful games this weekend that could lead to a Rose Bowl berth for Oregon or Utah, for instance. We could see Utah back in there for a second consecutive year.
And a UCLA win this week at home over USC, I think, eliminates them, the whole conference, from any talk about a Pac-12 team in the college football playoff. But obviously the Rose Bowl is still out there for someone as well. A lot of things we're going to figure out a lot this week, but it's all leading to what is a terrific Thanksgiving weekend of games and rivalry week, which is always great.
And the upsets, while I know many fans, and especially in the Southeast region, are rooting against the Pac-12 to just kind of, or they're rooting for the Pac-12 to kind of beat up on each other.
Self-destruct.
Yeah. If UCLA just can beat Arizona, we would have a much better, more impactful reason to watch USC-UCLA, right? It's still very much watchable. Don't get me wrong there. But you've got UCLA that's kind of the surprise of the Pac-12. Meanwhile, you've got USC after 4 wins last year trying to make the college football playoff, and that would be the storyline for both. Yeah. And now we don't get that.
Yeah, it's and this is going to happen. You whittle things down as you get close to the end of the season, but there's still a lot of storylines left. But really, I mean, we just talked with Danny Kanell about it. When one loss Clemson, one loss North Carolina in a Power 5 conference in the ACC is really not under any consideration, even if they went out and win the conference, to being in the playoff, we got a very small group of teams that we're considering right now. I also am a pretty strong believer that LSU, even though they're 6th, doesn't really have a great shot with the 2 losses, even if they beat Georgia. I was arguing this with an LSU grad last night, in fact, about how Tennessee, if they win out, they're still going to have the upper hand. 1 less loss and the blowout win at LSU, because if you take LSU over Tennessee, then it opens the door for the argument that, wait a minute, then should Tennessee be in over Georgia? If Tennessee has better wins than Georgia, they won at LSU, they beat Alabama. Georgia didn't do those things. All Georgia did was beat Tennessee head-to-head by 14 at home. So if the Tennessee 27-point win at LSU doesn't matter, then maybe you should examine Tennessee, Georgia. And again, I'm not making that argument.
I know.
Georgia's in over Tennessee. They beat them head-to-head. But if someone wants to make, the extra game and the win over Georgia now jumps a team with one fewer loss that also beats you head-to-head at home, I'm not buying it. So LSU eliminated, ACC eliminated. We got a small number of teams to watch. It's TCU. It's one-loss Pac-12 champion, which would be USC at this point. It's Tennessee. Not a lot else out there.
Correct me if I'm wrong here.
Then the Ohio State-Michigan.
The higher-ranked team not in the playoff goes to the Sugar Bowl from the SEC?
Yes.
Regardless of what the bowl wants.
I'd have to look that up.
Would they want LSU?
No.
Okay.
They'd want Tennessee.
Okay.
There's no doubt in my mind. They had LSU at a game to start the season against Florida State. The travel factor.
No, I'm just thinking, to me, that's the ceiling for them at 2 losses.
Tennessee in the Sugar Bowl.
I don't think they get in the playoff.
They will make a lot of money off Tennessee in the Sugar Bowl. It's been a long time since they've been there. It's been since 1990 against Virginia, I think, in the Sugar Bowl for Tennessee. They will send a lot of fans to pack the dome down in New Orleans for that one.
Indianapolis, the Colts, they go win against the Raiders. One of the big storylines on Monday was what we saw from Jeff Saturday and how the coaching staff that was left over came together and put together a game plan with Matt Ryan back at quarterback and with Jonathan Taylor healthy at running back. Went on the road and won 25-20. Now they return home, and they've got the Philadelphia Eagles, Chad, who are coming off their first loss of the season. And when you look at what Washington did, it's not like the Commanders ran the football well on a stat sheet. They didn't have massive numbers rushing. They had such a large number of carries that it kept Philadelphia to just 47 snaps, I believe, on offense, which is a season low. And when you think about how Indianapolis can go about this game, and I didn't pick Indy to win this game. I would have included them earlier in the show. They do have a formula that can with Jonathan Taylor in the backfield. Even more so than what we've seen from the Commanders. I'm intrigued here just to see what Jeff Saturday does after all the hype and discussion and anger and disappointment, however you want to describe it, from other coaches across the media members in general, the Fritz Pollard Alliance, which we'll get to in just a moment. Chad, this is one of those games that even if they perform well, if they play well, we're going to judge it and say, he may end up getting this job. And maybe Jim Irsay's already made up his mind in that regard. But
in that he wants him?
Yeah. Well, we know he wants him.
Yeah.
But he does have to earn it a bit here. But, I mean, Mike Mularkey took over for Ken Wisenhunt in Tennessee and won one game. Maybe, was it one or two games? Won his debut in New Orleans for sure. And ended up getting that job. And everyone kind of knew he was getting the job even though they went through the interview process. Mularkey has even hinted at that.
So if you are an NFL owner, you get to that spot in life. Now, granted, Jim Irsay inherited it from his dad, the team,
Right.
but successful guy nonetheless. You get to that spot by being uber wealthy and really successful and typically very strong-minded about what you want and being you're going to be iron-willed and maybe stubborn to a fault at times with what you see and what you want. I think Jeff Saturday's already the coach. I think it's interim now, and he's going to be the full-time coach because just this move from Irsay screams that this is what he wants full-time. Now, if they win this weekend against Philadelphia, I am with you, Hutton. It's over. He's won the job. Going 2-0, winning in the first game, coming off the ESPN set to win, and then beating one-loss Philadelphia, it's over. Jeff Saturday is going to be the coach regardless of what happens. But, I mean, they still have games against Pittsburgh at home. They've got a game against the Texans at the end of the year. There's so many ways that if you just wanted to sell this as this is why we're keeping the guy, I mean, it could be as easy as, Well, the team was more excited, even though they lost every game after Vegas, and then they beat the Texans at the end of the year, which shows that I'm giving you what the pitch would be from Irsay,
right?
Which shows they were still in it to win it to the very end. And, oh, by the way, Frank Reich a year before, part of the reason he's not here is we actually had a playoff game to play for, and we didn't even show up in a 26-16 loss in Jacksonville. And this team, with nothing to play for at the end of the year, showed up and won the game and played hard against Houston. Jeff Saturday, leader of men. Jeff Saturday is my coach. That's what Irsay will argue at season's end if all that happens.
Well, and he can do whatever he wants to there, right? Like he's still going to have to go through the process, the hiring process, to honor the Rooney Rule. But, you know, you've got the Fritz Pollard Alliance that's looking into the Colts and hiring Jeff Saturday as the interim head coach. What makes this different is they went outside the organization to bring in a guy without just recommending or elevating one of the assistant coaches within the staff. I mean, that's happened over the course of the last however many years. I mean, it happens on a routine basis during the regular season. This was different where they went outside and they brought Saturday in within a 12-hour period is what Saturday has told us, what Irsay has told us. And so they're looking into whether or not a minority candidate should have been considered. But this is, to me, the organization and the structure and the history of the Colts would tell you this is not the organization that would bypass a minority candidate if Irsay felt like that person from the outside was the best possible person to lead his organization when he fired Frank Reich. I mean, he has a Hall of Fame minority coach in Tony Dungy.
That won his only Super Bowl with the Colts.
They have had many minority offensive and defensive coordinators.
Jim Caldwell,
in the
head
past.
coach.
Point being, this is, this is, to me, the track record doesn't match what people are trying to make this story become. Saturday in his opening presser with the individual media, it was the Wednesday of last week, he addressed this. He was like, look, you guys are talking about this. Like, here's the process. Like, I got a call here. We were texting about the offensive line. He was already a consultant, and I think that's ultimately what Jim Irsay's pointing to. He's like, well, we went outside the organization, but he's a paid consultant where I'm calling him to ask his thoughts on the offensive line. So, again, the interim tag here is different than the hiring process that goes on throughout the months of February and March.
Yeah, I think the intention behind the Rooney Rule is noble of what the attempt was. I think the Fritz Pollard Alliance, all of that is the intentions are good, but I think it's having an adverse effect at times on hiring. And it's for this reason. You're barking up the wrong tree with Jim Irsay. It's very simple. This guy is not a racist. This is not someone who's not going to give a minority a chance. I mean, it's a waste of effort. It's a waste of air to talk about him passing over a minority because, what was it Joe Thomas said? He's drinking buddies with Jeff Saturday. Jeff Saturday even laughed and said, I don't think I've ever had many drinks with Jim Irsay at all. I'm not a big drinker even, and kind of laughed it off. It's just ridiculous. I mean, if there is a track record with an owner that you want to specifically look into and say, man, this guy only hires people who looks just like him, and there's a lot of black people playing football, and there's not one on this staff, or this guy has this record of never hiring someone, by all means, look into that if you see a track record. Jim Irsay is not the guy to look into with this. And I'm going back to Hutton, the strong-willed nature of a billionaire and someone who's had a lot of success in life, whether that be inherited success or a self-made person that ends up owning an NFL team. What is the one way to ensure that they're not going to do something is to force them to do it at times. And I think that's where the Rooney Rule may have gone wrong at times because owners don't want to be told or shamed into doing something. So if it feels forced and not natural to them and like it's not their decision, they may act in the opposite way because they don't want to be told what to do.
Well, technically, based on the way the policy works, you have to consider multiple candidates, right? The minority candidate.
Yes.
It's not, but then you
and
have
interview.
But right. Yeah, but then you have Steve Wilks, who is a part of the Brian Flores lawsuit. His name's also in that with the Arizona Cardinals from the 1 year. And Steve Wilks is now the interim head coach of the Carolina Panthers. Well, if David Tepper wants to go in a different direction after the season, is Wilks getting litigious with that as well? Because maybe he knew that the ownership wanted to go ahead and move on in a different direction the entire time. I don't know how you can jump to that conclusion given the opportunity that was given here. And knowing that Matt Rule was dead man walking anyway. I mean, that's the worst kept secret going into the season, is that Tepper was going to make a coaching change. They weren't going to have success there. Point being, I think we can go ahead and predict the storylines because it is very cyclical with NFL media, with NBA media, and the likes. Like, it's 24-hour news cycle, and you're looking for the next thing. This is the storyline, is that he took over and won the game when you've got other coaches and players ridiculing Irsay for being dumb for going and getting a coach who had at best won a handful of games in high school as a coach and was no longer the head coach in high school. That's the storyline. It's not that they didn't consider anyone else. Irsay can go hire any interim head coach he wants to at that point, based on the current policy and how it's written. I think what they're looking into is outside of the organization, not just elevating someone from within the organization with the interim tag.
And I also, the last thing I thought when Jeff Saturday was hired was, oh, he's white. Right. The first thing I thought was, I just saw Jeff Saturday on SportsCenter yesterday, and now he's going to coach the Indianapolis Colts.
Yeah, the shock was Irsay went outside the box.
Yeah, does he know
again.
the vocabulary of the offense and defense and what he's getting into? That was the shock. Not at one point did I think, oh, they hired a white guy. And I'm going to be very clear. I can't get inside of Jim Irsay's mind, and I'm not someone who thinks that racism doesn't exist. It does, and I'm sure it does with maybe some NFL owners, probably. In fact, I don't think it does with Jim Irsay. I don't think it does with most, because they're trying to win. They're trying to be successful. You hire the best coach, period. If you interview someone and they're the best coach and they have the best track record or they ran the best unit, I don't care if they're from Pakistan, if they're African American, if they're Jewish, if they're whatever, Hispanic, hire the best coach. That needs to be the mantra for every NFL owner. Hutton, I think it is for the most part with NFL owners. It's hard for me to look at something and specify, boy, this was a decision based on race, or this was a racist decision by this owner. And I think the Rooney Rule on its face and the intention behind it is right and just, and it's given minority candidates the chance to interview for the head job, which is a good thing ultimately. I think it should play itself out eventually when you've got a league that's majority black, that you're going to have more black coaches and more black GMs at some point. I hope that happens, but I also can't sit here and be intellectually honest and try to act like, well, the owners are just hiring all these people because they're white and they look like. I just don't believe that.
Yeah, I mean, in this case, he turned to someone he knew and trusted, that they both said, had a long-standing relationship behind the scenes in Indianapolis. Irsay points to Jeff Saturday, who stands up at the podium and says, I'm here because it's here. He's not there because of any other reason from any other owner that said, hey, Jeff, you want to be the interim head coach? He's not going anywhere else like that. He's going based on the relationship with Jim Irsay.
And I get so tired of
it's the interim tag.
You call it, it's like the layup, right? The layup story report, the layup opinion of
predictable.
Here's where
easy.
The predictable media line is going to go with this. Okay, now we're going to attack this. And it's NBA, it's NFL, it's across the board with sports media a lot of times. That's why I fight back on Bill Cowher and Joe Thomas and everyone that acts like, Jeff Saturday just can't coach. This is a slap in the face to coaches everywhere. And I get that you're a part of a fraternity. If you're an NFL coach or you've been a head coach, I understand that. It's less about you attacking Jeff Saturday and more about you protecting your buddy who's a defensive coordinator somewhere that you wanted to get that job or they wanted to get that job. I get all that. It's a hard gig. Jeff Saturday may be capable of doing it. He may not be good at all. And he said as much. Sure. He's humble enough to say, Maybe I'm good at this, maybe I'm not. I don't know. But I've heard Jeff Saturday speak. We've seen him play. We've seen him as a leader on the Colts. I'm sorry to Bill Cowher and everyone else. He is intelligent enough to make it work as an NFL head coach. There are a lot of intelligent people who could make it work as an NFL head coach that may have not had any experience in coaching. I hate to break this news to you. Experience helps. It helps to be around. They may have no experience in NFL. They may have experience somewhere else. They can figure it out. Jeff Saturday has experience in the NFL. He has experience around great coaches. He has experience in the media, which I honestly believe helps him as a head coach in the NFL, that media training and experience. So don't act like the job is something that only you and someone who is a quality control assistant for 17 years can pull off. It's just false.
Well, but
and I'm hoping Jeff Saturday proves everyone wrong with this.
It's also credit to the coaches that have been lifers in football that are under Jeff Saturday that did their job and went out and won a big game on the road against the Raiders. To Brian Bratton, who is one of the offensive quality control coaches, or to the defensive line coach, last name is Ollie, I believe, in Indianapolis, or Mike Mitchell, or Cato June, or any of these assistants that were on Frank Reich's staff that on Tuesday of last week met Jeff Saturday for the first time. And then 5 days later, won a game in Las Vegas. That's the story. And that part is quickly overshadowed by the comments from those within the league that say, well, this guy has no business being in this fraternity. It's the fraternity of the Colts coaching staff and the players in the locker room that won the game.
Yeah. And look,
all Jeff Saturday did was galvanize that staff to do their jobs.
They were professionals. And Frank Reich's not some angry dictator either. I don't think he was like being mean to the staff or anything like that when he was there. But what Jeff Saturday did, this is also in part Jeff Saturday's doing, because he clearly just went in there with the right attitude and mentality. I really think just listening to his press conference, he humbled himself before those assistant coaches that have been there. And he asked for their help, even after the game.
Even when making a change at quarterback, he made it their decision and not his.
And what did he say after the game? It was amazing watching this machine work all week and watching these men go to work and prepare for this game and seeing how well they did their jobs. That's a leader that knows what that locker room needs and that coaching staff needs. So, look, if he comes in there with any different attitude, if he's like, hey, you guys haven't gotten the job done and I'm the man for the job and here's what you're going to do. If that's your first meeting, you've lost. You've lost the staff. You've lost the team. If you come in acting that way. He didn't, clearly, and he got a great performance from the staff and the players last week. I hope it continues.
Coming up, final thoughts later this hour on some of the NFL matchups. We will also get into the injury report going into the weekend. When we come back, the top 5 college football storylines for tomorrow's kickoffs. We'll dive deep on those matchups next on OutKick 360.
Chris was a funny guy, and not like a clown, like make you laugh funny. He's just a genuinely funny guy. But I got to the team, and they were already deployed. Team 3 was deployed to Fallujah, and I got there and had a lot of time on my hands. So I went to free fall school and sniper school, and next thing you know, the team comes back, and I find out I'm in Chris's platoon. He had made a name for himself in Ramadi as a shooter, and at that point, he was just a white kid from Texas, so they called him Tex. But as a new guy sniper, Chris was really developing his reputation as the man. And if you've ever worked on a team with somebody who knows everything, like Chris was that guy. When it came to sniping, if it came time to do like diving, Chris wasn't there. He didn't like to dive and go underwater and do that whole C component of SEAL. But when it came to sniping, that was his thing. And his ability to teach people, like, he would hold you to a very, very high standard, but at the end of the day, like, he was there to teach you. And for a SEAL sniper, knowing that we were going to Ramadi at the 11th hour, that was huge, because he could have been that guy that was like, I really don't care. You're a new guy, just pick up brass and shut up. Or it's like, hey, when you're inside a sniper hide, this is how you got to set up so you don't get shot in the face. Thank you. I appreciate that. And his ability to teach young SEALs made us much, much more effective, because when we got to Ramadi, a lot of snipers were new guy SEALs. Myself, Johnny Kim, the astronaut now, We were stepping up into those roles, and we had to be combat effective. And it wasn't for Chris, the dude who knew everything, and his ability to teach with some humor, we wouldn't have been as effective as we were. For example, like Chris' story is his humor. I discuss this in my book. We were out in the desert training. We're doing our land warfare block, and there's a little bit of team building exercises that go on late in the evening, where if you're a new SEAL hanging out with a bunch of older operators and you don't see any of your new guy buddies around, you're probably in danger. So that exact moment happened. I was out in the desert, and the guys were having a couple cocktails. Look around, none of my fellow new guys were there. And then next thing you know, it's like a tsunami. You get jumped, taped up, and I wake up like a mummy, completely taped up. Like literally all my nose and my mouth were open. I was completely taped up and, strapped on a gurney and taken over in my rack and all that stuff, and left for, I thought, until I blossomed as a butterfly. And about 10 minutes later, I hear this cackling, and you could never not hear Chris's cackling coming a mile down the road. And he came down cackling. I could hear him cackling. He comes in. He's like, "Hey, buddy, you all right?" I'm like, "Yeah." And he's like, "Good. You're going to sit here for a little bit, then we'll cut you out." But that's, I think, the level that Chris would go to, whereas like some guys wouldn't care if you got taped up and left for dead. But Chris was one that definitely, he was kind of a hugger when it came to new guys. But that's what made him a great teacher, and that's what made us quite effective within his platoon.
So we obviously, what you just said about him is the guy, the teacher, the mentor. He sounds obviously as a class act individual. From the shooting standpoint, from the sniping standpoint, what made Chris Kyle when it came to getting that job done?
Yeah, he was a guy that was there for game time. He obviously put in the work. He was a great shot. There were times though that, he was not a great shot. I remember training on the range, and his target looked like he was shooting buckshot out there. He claimed like the scope rings were loose, but ultimately, like he was the hardest worker. He was the guy who sat behind the scope just tirelessly. His eye never came off the scope. You never saw his head droop, to rest his neck. And that's like, if you're a hunter, more time in the woods is gonna make you a successful hunter. And Chris, his eye was always on the scope, and his dedication to the job. When it came to recce's and finding buildings, he knew where to set up. He knew where the enemy was coming from, and he was very, very good at getting us in the right position to interdict, which ultimately saves lives when it comes to Marines and Army. But he just had an uncanny intuition as to how to hunt properly on the battlefield.
At the top games across the Saturday slate for college football, OutKick 360 rolls on. Glad you're with us if you're listening to this great radio station, or if you're streaming us live at OutKick.com. We hope you'll like, subscribe, and share the podcast as well. If you miss portions of that, just search us out, OutKick 360 on, wherever you download your audio. Chad, you have a column up right now. OutKick.com is where you can find the details of all of this. Here's Withrow's top 5 storylines to watch for tomorrow's kickoffs.
So, this is a little different from the top 10 games of the week.
Yes.
I'd say this is more of a general idea to follow.
Yes.
For the weekend. But the number one thing is the number one game of the week. It's the battle for L.A. It's USC and UCLA in prime time, in a game where it took a little longer for Chip Kelly to get things rolling at UCLA, but he's doing it now. Great quarterback, great running back. They got a solid chance to knock off USC, and for USC and Caleb Williams, an opportunity to stay alive for the playoff, stay alive for a Pac-12 championship, for a Rose Bowl also.
Yeah.
But Hutton, maybe even just as important, Caleb Williams to rocket up the Heisman race in this game with a lot of eyeballs on it.
It sets up well for him, and it's not I think he's going to play well. He's been playing very well. He's also playing for a coach that is known as the Heisman quarterback whisperer over the last decade. So when you factor that in, and you factor Hollywood and LA, and it's USC, and they're back, and they're one loss, and they won 4 games a year ago, and they're going to the college football playoff, if you buy that they're skipping over some team, again, it's going to be because of Caleb Williams, and it's happening for him at the right time, where the voters are just now starting to determine where their vote's going to go. If you don't know you're voting for Hendon Hooker, you're voting for C.J. Stroud or Caleb Williams, right?
Yeah. My prediction is still right now, I think it's going to be where Vegas has it at this point. I think it's going to be C.J. Stroud 1, Hendon Hooker as the runner-up in votes in New York. That may change.
I don't know if we do know this.
If C.J. Stroud plays poorly against Michigan, they lose, obviously that changes things.
I mean, the voters themselves, there's nothing Hendon Hooker can do at this point. I realize he can have flashy numbers.
All he can do is he can help the math formula. So when they have all those side-by-sides of the numbers next to each other, he can add to that big time and stay right up there at the top of every statistical category. That's what he can do. Because no one's going to look at that end-of-year formula and say, oh, he did this against this team. They're just going to look at the totals, yards, touchdowns, lack of interceptions. He can continue to pad that these next 2 weeks against South Carolina and Vandy. So I think that's where he can help himself. But you're right. He's not going to have a national spotlight game unless they're in some shocking close game late and he's got to make big plays to bail Tennessee out of some huge upset.
Right.
That's the only way he's going to be a spotlight where people are tuning in to watch him, that wouldn't otherwise be watching that game. Second storyline. And I titled this, Kansas might give Arch Manning second thoughts. I don't believe Arch Manning is the type of guy or in the type of family that makes that commitment and then backs out of it. He's going to Texas. So it's a little bit tongue-in-cheek with that. But a little PTSD here for Steve Sarkisian in Texas. This was the game a year ago that Kansas won in Austin as a 31-point underdog. 57-56. Kansas won. Texas was 5-7 a year ago. Steve Sarkisian is 11-11 right now at Texas. A lot of talk about him as this offensive mastermind. His play designs are better than anyone else. I didn't see it against TCU with 199 total yards and a 5-star quarterback and Quinn Ewers. If they lose this game to Kansas, all I'll say about Texas is your one hope is Arch Manning in the recruiting class, because Steve Sarkisian has not given you a lot of reasons for hope other than recruiting. On-field success has not worked out. This is a disappointing season, even if they win their last 2. Lose to Kansas in what's going to be a fun environment in Lawrence. Then you go to Texas Tech to close out the season. This could be a 6-6 team that followed a 5-7 team in the first 2 years. And the talent is better than that at Texas. The schedule isn't overly difficult. That's a disappointment for Steve Sarkisian.
But
they're also a 9-point favorite on the road in this game.
Sarkisian just hit the lottery. He got the name.
He got the celebrity college quarterback
position. I think he's going to be fine.
No, he's going to be safe. Trust me.
No, not safe. I think that their program moving forward will be fine because of this.
All Texas, though, can point to, if they're going to brag about their program, it's that they landed Arch Manning. It's not anything their coach has done. You know what his best performance was the year?
That may be all he needs to do.
It's a 1-point loss to Alabama. That's the one thing I'll give him. They had a chance to beat Alabama in week 2 and really change the complexion of this whole thing, but they didn't. So
they're
11-11. Steve Sarkisian.
It's just odd to me. Like Texas, you're right. Disappointing season, but at the same time, they're still in the conversation. Meanwhile, when's the last time we mentioned Oklahoma?
It's been a while, and that's. I'll go to Oklahoma next.
Okay.
Because Bedlam may lead to a bowlless Oklahoma. They are at 5-5 right now. If they lose this game, and they are favored at home by 7, and Oklahoma State's got all sorts of quarterback issues because Spencer Sanders isn't 100%. There's a solid chance. I'm sorry. It's Oklahoma that closes the season at Texas Tech, not Texas. So if they lose this game, they go to Texas Tech. They may be a slight underdog or a very small favorite in that game. If they lose these last 2, Hutton, That would break a 23-year bowl streak. The last time Oklahoma didn't go to a bowl game,
wow,
T. Martin was winning a national title for Tennessee in 1998. Starting with Bob Stoops in 99, then the national championship in year 2 in 2000 with Josh Heupel at quarterback.
Yeah.
They have gone to a bowl every year since 1999. That could snap this year in year 1 for Brent Venable, which is shocking for a team that I believe was picked by the media to win the Big 12
I picked
this year.
them to win the Big 12.
Yeah, but not just you. I think the majority of Big 12 media at media days picked them to win the conference.
Yeah, and I'm thinking to myself, like, okay, their coach is coming in and their quarterback coming in, replacing who left. I'm still thinking about the defense, and no, it hasn't been anything close to what was who bolted to go to Los Angeles.
So Bedlam's always a fun game, fun rivalry to watch, and watch it while you can because it's going away. Because these two programs hate each other, especially after Oklahoma's bolting the Big 12 for the SEC.
This could get ugly.
Yeah.
And I know Oklahoma State has also been ugly recently, too, in a surprising fashion. But Gundy, he will run up the score on the road.
I don't know that he's going to have a chance unless Spencer Sanders is magically healed and 100%. But if he has the opportunity, he absolutely will. And as this thing nears its end, the next 2 years, 2 or 3 years, with the last few, it's going to there's going to be some fisticuffs at some point in the game between these two as they know they're not going to play each other the next year. All right. Auburn, Western Kentucky is important. Why, you ask? And don't laugh. It's a survival game for Cadillac Williams. It's one more week to get one more win. They are a favorite, albeit a small one, 5.5-point favorite over a good mid-major in Western Kentucky. Jason Campbell was on OutKick 360 earlier this week. He talked about the scene on the field, Jordan-Hare Stadium, when Cadillac Williams won that game against A&M. It was a 13-10 grinded-out type game. Not very appealing to the eye. But it's important because it shows that these Auburn players have stuck with it. There's still fight left. They're playing for their coach. Obviously, Cadillac Williams has emotion tied to that program and that university. He's shown a lot of that. And if you say, oh, that wouldn't work, it can't work, there are plenty of examples of hype man / CEO / whatever you want to call it, promoter type coaches working out. Guys who weren't coordinators on one side of the ball. Also, Sam Pittman at Arkansas, offensive line coach, understands the Arkansas culture, was a beloved assistant there for a while. It's worked out. This year's not been as good, but it's worked out for him. Dabo Swinney was not an offensive or defensive coordinator when he took over at Clemson on an interim basis, and it's worked great there. Shane Beamer, another example of this, a guy that was hired, felt more like a hype man, still does at times. But hey, he was co-first-year coach of the year a year ago with Josh Heupel and had a surprise bowl run and bowl win over North Carolina at South Carolina. So also, there is precedent there.
Ed
Orgeron's maybe the best example. National championship, culture fit, hype man, not a brilliant strategist, right? And same could be said for Les Miles in a lot of ways.
Championship winner.
Won a national title at LSU. So I don't think it's going to happen. But if he wins this week, Hutton, and he wins the Iron Bowl, it may happen. It's a very good argument for Cadillac Williams if he somehow, don't think it's going to happen, but if he upset Nick Saban and Alabama in the Iron Bowl and they won their last 3 games of the season, he's going to get some support to get that job full-time.
It's a weird game because Western Kentucky can put up points, and it's only, what'd you say, a 5.5 point?
5.5. Auburn favored by 5.5.
Yeah. This is, I want to bet Auburn big. I do believe in Cadillac Williams and what he's doing this year.
I'm telling you, like it sounds silly when you hear the other names that's being mentioned for Auburn, but if you win and you can give the right sales pitch and everyone's united behind you, which they weren't for Brian Harsin, it might work. I'm here to say it may work.
And we shouldn't just roll up the paper and throw it away saying, oh, the Iron Bowl's Bama. I mean, they nearly won last year, and Bama's lost 2 and one on a last-second deflection last week against Ole Miss on the road.
All of that being said,
yes,
if they lose to Western Kentucky, go ahead and get back to the message boards, Auburn fans, and start picking between Deion Sanders, Lane Kiffin, and Hugh Freeze because he's not going to be the coach. Finally, another big storyline, the Big Ten West. Look, someone's got to win this division. Someone's got to represent the Big Ten West in Indianapolis on December 3rd.
Denver and Vegas this week in the NFL.
Yeah,
Someone's got to win a game.
The Nathaniel Hackett line applies to the Big Ten West. Look, somebody's got to win this, right? Someone is going to come out of the Big Ten West and play Ohio State or Michigan in Indianapolis for the privilege of losing by 3+ touchdowns, because that's probably what's going to happen. But here are the standings going into the second last week of the regular season. Illinois at 4-3, Iowa at 4-3, Purdue at 4-3, Minnesota at 4-3, Wisconsin at 3-4, all with a chance to win the division. Tomorrow's schedule: Illinois at Michigan. I think Illinois is going to get beaten down badly in that one. That would put them at 4-4. Wisconsin at Nebraska, only a 10.5-point line. Wisconsin should win that easily. Nebraska's quit, I believe, for the season. So then that would get Wisconsin up to 4-4. You got Northwestern at Purdue. Purdue should roll. That would put Purdue at 5-3. And then you've got the winner of Iowa, Minnesota, getting to 5-3. If that winner's Iowa, they control their destiny. If they win against Nebraska the next week, they are your representative in the Big Ten West, which is shocking.
And they're back in it again.
But also, Minnesota is a 2.5-point home favorite against the Hawkeyes in Minneapolis tomorrow. It's not great football. These are not great teams in 2022, but at least it's close. We've got quite the pennant race.
Well, it's close.
In the Big Ten West between these teams.
And then Championship Saturday on December the 3rd or whatever date that is not. It's 44-3.
Again, you're playing for the right to go get blown out by one of those two teams if you're the Big Ten West.
It's very unfortunate. And the traditionally, Chad, the loser of the Big Ten championship game would be playing Kentucky in the Citrus Bowl.
That's right. For years, that honor went to Tennessee, according to Steve Spurrier. You can't spell citrus without UT. Now, maybe, it's not going to be Kentucky.
It's not going to be
this
Kentucky,
year.
yeah. We get at least a fresh look at that.
We may see them right down the road here in the Music City Bowl, here in Nashville. That could be the Music City Bowl choice. You think Kentucky fans are traveling for a bowl at the end of this year?
No.
I would say not the way they have, especially having gone
Music City
to
Bowl
Florida.
gets a little bit better.
They've gone to some good Florida games the last few years.
Yeah.
So stepping down from that's a tough come down.
I don't think Ole Miss is faltering to this point, but it could end up being them. I'm trying to think of the other teams right there. Bama's not going to lose enough there.
Mississippi State. It's going to be a 6-6, 7-5 type
from
team.
the East.
Yeah. Or South Carolina's bowl eligible. They're 6-4 right now, so they're going to go to one of those bowls.
Where's Florida right now?
Florida's 6-4, I think, too. Let me look that up.
Because they've got Vandy this week.
Maybe Florida can get bowl eligible with a win over Vandy. They're a 14-point favorite, I think I saw, over Vandy this weekend. They're playing better.
Well, and
they were impressive to me over South Carolina's offense has been bad all year.
I think
They're
they
really bad
figured
against
out,
Florida. Florida played well.
They dismissed their leading tackler in the year. I think they figured out who's buying in, who's not. They're kind of weeding through the muck.
It's also
of whatever they inherited.
It's also a very tough job to screw up. Florida is 6-4, so they're bowl eligible already, and they're a 14-point favorite to get to 7-4. Danny Kanell said right now Florida State would be the look-ahead line is Florida State -7 against Florida at the end of the year. So it'd be a Florida State favorite in that game. But, Florida's still sitting there with a chance to get to 8-4 in the season. They should be 7-4. After Vandy, they beat their rival. That's a solid first year. And you combine that
and getting to 8
Florida,
wins would get you here, I think.
Yeah, and you've got Billy Napier.
Right.
I think they would be past that. I think they would probably be in a Florida bowl game at 8-4. This game's more 7-5.
I don't know though, because there's so many SEC West teams that will be there that have some appeal. I realize they're in Florida, but Florida doesn't travel where to Florida.
They don't really want to take them there. They want to have them travel somewhere most of the time.
Yeah.
Billy Napier's recruiting well too. It's a tough job to screw up. Let me say that about Florida. So for those that are down on Billy Napier, it's still such an attractive job from a recruiting standpoint. You got to be really bad to butcher the job and not have some success at Florida. I think he's going to be successful.
Just a couple of clarifications, and thanks to Davey Hudson for passing this along. The line for Auburn and Western Kentucky down to 4.5 right now. OutKick.com/bet. Go take the Tigers.
Do you think we just affected the line when I started talking about it?
We moved it.
Davey's tracking it the whole time.
Yeah,
and once I started talking about this a big game, he's like, you know what? I'm going to put some money on Western Kentucky. And it moved the line down a little bit.
Kentucky, Florida, and South Carolina, all 3 and 4 in the SEC East standings right now.
Who's going to win the third spot in the SECs? Maybe that's my storyline next week. The Big Ten West champions, my story this week. The battle for third in the SEC East is going to come down
It's Florida.
to the final week. But all those teams are done after this week for the most part because South Carolina plays Clemson, Florida plays Florida State.
But
Georgia is number one. They play Georgia Tech.
But Florida's got Vandy. Meanwhile, Kentucky has Georgia, and South Carolina has Tennessee. So it's Florida.
Should be Florida.
They should be.
Should be Florida.
And also the media poll prior to the start of the season in the Big 12, Baylor picked first by the media. Oklahoma second.
And Baylor was my preseason pick to win the conference.
17 first-place votes. Oklahoma with 12. Oklahoma State with 9.
Look at me going right in line with the media.
TCU
the media pick.
7th.
I'm such a groupthink guy now. I just went right in line with Big 12 media and picked Baylor to win it before the season. And they're not going to win it.
And Davey also points out, to answer the question about Kentucky traveling, they would travel one last time so they could say they saw the number 1 overall pick in the NFL draft for the final time at quarterback.
Well played, Davey. Well played. You cannot miss your opportunity to watch Will Levis throw for 98 yards in a bowl game in a bad weather venue
against Iowa.
Does Birmingham still have a bowl? That may be where they end up. Does the Birmingham Bowl still exist?
It's the Birmingham Bowl at the Alamo Dome.
And that's a bowl game that's always very, very cold when they play it, I feel like, the Birmingham Bowl.
Kicks off the season, doesn't it? Or is it? Yeah, it does, for the SEC bowl games.
It's a weird one because there was a time where it was played on like January 6th, like the day before the national championship.
I think it's earlier now, but
it's one of those weird ones, though, that floats. Like sometimes it's after New Year's.
When Vandy played in the Birmingham Bowl, I felt like it was early December.
When they played Houston in the bowl, I promise it was like January 4th. They played that game.
Oh, it was the game in between the New Year's Day and then the championship game?
Yeah, they're playing it in between the big, the national championship. They had to have a couple
more
bowl games.
How did they get that spot?
Well, probably because ESPN told them you're going to have this spot because no one else wanted to do it.
Yeah, but you're the only game on. There's no competition, is my point.
But no one's watching, I think, that time also.
I guess.
I think most people turn the calendar to the national championship game once New Year's Day is over.
Yeah.
So if you're playing in one of those games after New Year's Day.
It's the first time we look at the NBA standings.
The assumption is Hutton's going to check out what the Celtics have been up to.
Yeah.
And then only fans of the team playing in that BBVA Compass Bowl in Birmingham or whatever it's called now will watch that game. No one else will.
Chargers getting some good news on the injury report for their matchup against the Chiefs. I'll tell you about that. And the other injuries of note across the NFL. Give you some final thoughts going into the weekend for a big football slate. That's next on OutKick 360.
Hey, listen, if you missed my show, don't at me. I've got you covered. Take a look. So I saw a headline, and maybe it was OutKick, maybe it was somewhere else. And maybe it was you. Hell, I don't know. Auburn would have interest in Dabo Swinney. And I thought to myself, well, no kidding. Would Dabo Swinney have interest in Auburn?
Yes. I think Dabo Swinney would have interest in Auburn. Yes.
Oh.
I think you would. I think you would. I think that, if here's what it's always been about Dabo, and I'm trying to be careful with my words here, but was it ever going to be the Alabama situation that a lot of people thought, Dabo's going to end up at Alabama after Nick Saban's done? I don't know if you could say that now. Does the ACC, does it get old? Do you see Dabo as a lifer? Here's what I'll add to that. Remember last season? It's hard to forget because it was one of the craziest coaching cycles we've ever seen, where Lincoln Riley leaves somewhere at Oklahoma where everybody thought he would be a lifer and ends up at USC. Brian Kelly dips out of Notre Dame, heads down to Baton Rouge. Mario Cristobal goes to Miami. I'm just saying, the days of us being shocked by coaches that are leaving for other schools and other opportunities, I think are gone. And here's something else too as well. Do not be shocked to hear that Dabo Swinney's agent reached out to Auburn to gauge interest, to see what Auburn was thinking. That's also a very smart move by the agent, because when Clemson starts getting out of the limelight, okay, well, Dabo's like, okay, well, I need to make myself known a little bit more. Like, and not known in that sense. I'm talking money wise. Let's get, let everybody is kind of maybe taking me for granted a little bit at Clemson. Let's see what it looks like if my name starts getting floated for other jobs.
9 to 11 Eastern time at OutKick.com.
What's up, guys? Tune in every Monday, Wednesday, and Thursday at 7 p.m. Eastern as I break down all the hot topics and share my final thoughts. But in case you missed an episode, here is what you missed. Contrary to popular belief, you can listen to and respect someone's point of view without absorbing it. I have some final thoughts. Folks, it's the week after midterms, and yeah, our country is divided, and yeah, it's getting worse. But here's the deal. I believe we do all want what's best for this country. We just have different ways of going about it, and that's fine. This political climate has driven us so far apart, we've forgotten how to agree to disagree. We've also been conditioned to steer clear of religion and politics, especially conservatives. The fear of discussing religion and politics has led to an inability to navigate difficult conversations about difficult topics. That needs to change. How the heck are we going to change anything if we don't step up and speak our minds? Free speech isn't just saying what you want to say, it's also hearing what you don't want to hear. And I've heard from countless people, particularly young people, who are afraid to say what they want to say for fear of being labeled, rejected, shunned, or even physically attacked. And that BS, it has to change. Political correctness is intellectual dishonesty. So stand up, speak out, find your voice, and use it. Take it from someone who is labeled too controversial on a daily basis. When you live, speak, and stand without fear, everything changes. And if that's controversial, so be it. And that's why I stand up for the average American, for law enforcement, ranchers, farmers, veterans, military, our flag, our national anthem. I'm going to ruffle feathers, and I'm going to ignite debate. I'm going to speak my mind and inspire you to do the same. I don't want to tell you how to think. I don't even want you to think like me. I just want you to think for yourself.
NFL injury report for your favorite team or your fantasy league out this week. Jerry Jeudy will not be playing for the Broncos. Juju Smith-Schuster, of course, in concussion protocol. Jamar Chase will miss one more week. The thought is he's back for Week 12 in a matchup against the Titans in Nashville. Corey Davis is out for the second or third consecutive week, even after the bye. He is out against the Patriots on Sunday for the Jets. J.D. McKissick is out as well for Washington, and Mark Ingram for the Saints. And there's one more quick one, Chad, and I apologize. Here we go. Derek Stingley, rookie corner, out for the Texans. And Marshawn Lattimore will also miss this week in the secondary for New Orleans.
Memo sent out by Roger Goodell just hours after Titans offensive coordinator Todd Downing arrested for DUI in Williamson County outside of Nashville early this morning. The memo states, in light of recent events, clubs are reminded that league policy prohibits alcoholic beverages, including beer, in the locker room, practice, or other facilities, or while traveling on team buses or planes at any time during the preseason, regular season, or postseason. This applies to all players, coaches, club personnel, and guests traveling with your team. The policy has been in place for many years. Making alcohol available at club facilities or while traveling creates significant and unnecessary risk to the league, its players, coaches, and other violations of this important policy will be taken seriously and will result in significant discipline. That is the first two paragraphs of a 3-paragraph statement, the last paragraph stating pretty much the same, that this apparently is something that's been in place for a long time, but is it honored by every team?
Well, I mean, we saw Taylor Heineke with a beer on the team flight last week, I believe, in a photo, because you had Chase Young doing like a selfie or something with him.
There's also sponsors that travel with the team.
Yeah, and I've been on these flights.
I'm pretty sure they drink on the flights.
No,
right?
I've never seen that.
No.
I mean, they may have like exquisite like caviar or something, but it's not. It's not
foie gras.
In traveling, I traveled with the Titans for like 8 years. Never once did they come around. It's not like a Southwest flight where they come around and be like, hey, would you like a beverage? Like it's not like that. You get your Coke Zero, your water, coffee, whatever you want, but not beer. Now, you can go to any stadium right now in the NFL, and you'll see a cooler beer in the corridors. It's not difficult to figure out that there's cold beer in this cooler.
For teams, personnel,
yeah, but for anyone working at the stadium that's a part of the team that wants a cold beer after they're done, I mean, it's not hard to go pick one out of the cooler and have one.
And I'm sure it's not hard to bring them on the plane if you want.
I guess. I mean, it's not like a party breaks out on the Titans team plane, though. That is very unlike, and I've traveled with Robinson and Vrabel. That would be very out of the ordinary for a routine mid-season game that they won on the road in Green Bay. Getting back I think they landed at like 2:11 a.m. That would be way on the opposite end of the spectrum for that.
There may have been time in between him getting pulled over.
I get, yeah.
I don't know, but
yeah. This is a reminder from Commissioner. A reminder, join us Monday, 3 o'clock Eastern. OutKick 360 will recap the football weekend.